Chapter 353. After a long time, the calm and composed general of the army suddenly jumped up in rage. He kicked the table in front of him and roared in anger, "Wu Kuangyun! You intolerable pig! I'll pull out your tendons. I'll peel off your skin. I'll drink your blood. I'll chop your body into pieces. I'll kill your whole family. I'll exterminate your whole family." The scouts were only 200 kilometers away from the enemy when they arrived. 2.5 days had passed by now. The battle had already begun. Tai Longqing was fuming with anger. He was stamping with rage. He was almost crazy. He smashed everything he could see in the general's tent. He was gasping for breath. He was fuming with anger. Tai Longqing had already made up his mind. "I won't care about beheading a general in front of a battle. If I see Wu Kuangyun again, I'll chop that pig's head off his neck as a sacrifice to the flag. Wu Kuangyun, this old man will kill you according to military law." Tai Longqing roared. His beard was like a halberd. The generals kept quiet out of fear. They didn't know that great General Wu Kuangyun was also depressed to the point of death. He would have killed himself if he knew Tai Longqing's current state. "What can I do? I'm a great general." "That's true. But I'm only a great general in name. His Majesty has already seized the real power. His Majesty makes all the decisions arbitrarily. What does it have to do with me? I've been kowtowing to persuade him. My forehead is swollen. Does anyone know this?" Your Majesty, you can't advance rashly," Wu Kuangyun said in a tearful voice. "I've already made up my mind. There's no need to say more." Tai Butian's face was as cold as ice. His gaze was as sharp as a sword. He was obstinate. Wu Kuangyun repeatedly tried to dissuade him. But Tai Butian ruthlessly rebuked him. Eventually he demoted the great general in private. This nominal great general had already become a soldier in the army. Tai Butian also had his own considerations. It would have been too hasty and thoughtless to dispatch troops at this time. It would have been disadvantageous to the overall situation. Furthermore, it was foolish of them to abandon their natural stronghold and take the initiative to attack. Once the army was defeated, they would be pursued by the enemy. It was very likely that the army would be routed like a landslide, and the enemy would kill their way into the heart of Iron Cloud. However, Tai Butian had other considerations. Relying on natural defenses was a bad idea. At most, he could guarantee that he would not lose, but he would never be able to obtain victory. This battle was a matter of life and death for the entire Iron Cloud. How could they be conservative? Everyone thought that this place would be defended to the death, but I wanted to take the initiative to attack. This was what it meant to be caught off guard. Bai Changtian's army had come from afar. But they hadn't arrived at their destination yet. In fact, they didn't even have the time to set up camp. Although it was risky, the current situation had reached a point where they had no choice but to take the risk. Moreover, there was also a very important person returning from this route, Minister Chu. So, Minister Chu would have fallen into a dead end if he had allowed Bai Changtian to set up a camp and block his way back. After all, he would have been surrounded by enemies in front of him, and would have been pursued from behind. Baidu Cheba world-defying heavens, no matter what, he would not allow it. No matter how one looked at it, they had no choice but to send out their troops. Moreover, the sooner the better. "Wu Kuangyun, you only need to fight. Go and seize victory." Tai Butian coldly said, "I don't care what a supreme commander like you thinks. But you only need to obey orders when the time comes. Anyone who disobeys orders will be beheaded." Wu Kuangyun wanted to cry but had no tears. He was an old soldier. He had been on the battlefield for half of his life. How could he not know that he had to take the enemy by surprise at this time? He had a 10% chance of winning. Bai Changtian was a famous general of his generation. But he would have never thought that the natural defenses would send out their troops to fight. After all, Great Zhao and Iron Cloud had been fighting for hundreds of years. Great Zhao had always tried every means to attack Iron Cloud, while Iron Cloud had only defended. This had never changed. This had become a fixed trend in the minds of all the generals. Perhaps, they would be able to defeat the famous White Tiger general in this battle. Immortal. Even if there was only a 1% chance of defeat, they couldn't let Tai Butian take the risk. Iron Cloud would have been completely routed if something went wrong. The White Tiger general, Bai Changtian, was also very puzzled. The enemy had a natural stronghold along the way. They didn't need a lot of people. In fact, they needed less than 1,000 people to defend this place. Even the attack of 100,000 troops would have been of no use. Why did the Prime Minister change his itinerary this time? And why did he arrange 500,000 troops here? This shouldn't have been the case. Whether it's from a strategic point of view or from the overall situation, such a decision shouldn't have been made. In Bai Chang Tian's mind, only 200,000 troops would have been needed to pin down the enemy. Then they would have taken over this place after the victory of the main battle had been achieved. Well, it's hopeless to attack head-on? Is it because of that King of Hell Chu? Humph. King of Hell Chu is called King of Hell. But he's only one man. It's impossible for a man to run for thousands of miles by himself. Moreover, he must have been chased for thousands of miles to reach this place. Wouldn't that make him an immortal? General, the heaven-splitting mountain pass is about 300 miles ahead. Brothers, we've been trekking for a long time. Men and horses are tired. Shouldn't we take a rest? The deputy general beside him said. Yes, we're almost there. What's there to rest for? How can a soldier not have the least bit of tenacity? Are they still my soldiers? Bai Chang Tian reprimanded with a cold face. Then, should we continue with the rapid march? The deputy general's face twitched. Bai Chang Tian slowly nodded. He then said in a routine manner, inform the brothers to speed up the march. We can set up camp as long as we reach the designated place. And we won't have to worry about anything from then on. We can take turns to rest. In all fairness, Bai Chang Tian felt very uncomfortable in his heart. His biggest contribution as a soldier was to attack a city, seize territory, and expand his territory. The decisive battle had arrived at this time. And he had to hide here. He couldn't get any credit for this battle. This made him feel very aggrieved. Bai Chang Tian almost thought that someone had given him a bad impression in front of the Prime Minister. However, it was a fool's dream to think that he could get any credit here. Attacking the heaven-splitting mountain pass was an arduous and thankless task. The enemy's geographical advantage was too abnormal. It was like a knife-cut cliff. Moreover, it was cut inwards. The entire mountain pass was 1,000 feet above the ground. It was almost vertical. One couldn't see anything below the mountain pass even if they raised their heads. In fact, it looked like a concave cave. Since ancient times, there had only been a narrow and winding path to reach the top. Moreover, it was so steep that it made people want to curse. Even the strongest physique would lose its strength by the time they climbed up. The enemy only needed 100 or so soldiers to defend the mountain pass. And they would be able to kill all the soldiers who could rush up without getting injured. Fight. How do we fight? Big. This is a disgrace. The war is about to begin, but I have to come here for a vacation. Long. Therefore, Bai Chang Tian had been strict with the army along the way. However, it was only out of habit. He had always been wise and prudent. But he was much more relaxed at this moment. After turning a bend in the mountain, the road ahead finally became a little more spacious. Bai Chang Tian's spirit was lifted. He was about to give the order to speed up when he suddenly wrinkled his brows. He felt that something was wrong. He couldn't help but frown and ponder. Then he felt that the ground under his feet was slightly trembling. Countless birds in the distance were startled. They squawked and flew in all directions. Countless small animals in the forest were frightened and fled in all directions. Smoke and dust rose to the sky in front of them and filled the entire sky. Enemy attack. The sharp bugle horn of the vanguard army sounded. It was accompanied by an extremely frightened scream. Bai Chang Tian's body tensed up. He immediately responded, "Army, stop. Get ready to meet the enemy." However, his scalp went numb when he looked at his surroundings. There are mountain walls on both sides. My troops are walking on this narrow mountain road. My men and horses are exhausted. There's no way to retreat. We can only fight among ourselves. We can only rush forward. However, the army didn't have any fighting spirit at the moment. Moreover, the enemy had clearly recharged their strength. So, how can we fight this battle? The army in the front stopped when the order was given. However, the army of 500,000 soldiers was marching at the same time. So the army in the front had stopped. However, the army in the rear hadn't received the order yet. Many soldiers had been rushing for several days. So they had been sleeping while walking. They had been relying on the support of the formation to stay standing. The soldiers in the front had been pushed forward by the soldiers in the rear. So the soldiers in the front had been pushed forward. They had slowly squeezed into a group in the middle of the formation. Their chests were pressed against each other's backs in an incomparably intimate manner. Curses were heard from the soldiers who didn't understand what was going on. The entire army had been thrown into chaos by the time they had stopped. Only the sounds of people cursing in different dialects could be heard. "Are you blind? You stepped on your grandfather." "Fuck. Whose grandfather are you?" "I'm your grandfather." "Puff. You dared to hit me. You dared to hit me. Brothers, attack. Kill this turtle. Fuck your mother. Fuck. Fuck. Bai Chang Tian looked at the general beside him in a panic. His complexion had turned deathly pale. He had been in the army for 30 years. However, this was the first time he had felt powerless. Everything had been going smoothly for the past several hundred years. So, he and everyone else knew that the heaven-splitting mountain pass's defenders wouldn't take the initiative to attack. Moreover, they hadn't seen even half of the enemy's scouts along the way. So, they knew that the enemy had chosen to stick to their defense. Their vigilance had been getting lower and lower. However, they hadn't expected that the enemy would strike a fatal blow at such a critical time. The sound of hoof beats from the opposite side was getting closer and closer. The enemy didn't slow down. Instead, they increased their speed. Their shouts and battle cries reverberated in the air. The enemy clearly wanted to rely on their sharpness and thunderous fury to defeat their troops in one fell swoop. A loud roar was heard. Then, a military flag suddenly fluttered in the wind and rolled out. The wind whistled and blew against the flag. A golden dragon was soaring in the sky above the flag. And a white cloud was crazily expanding above the golden dragon. Chapter 354. It seemed as if Bai Chang Tian's muttering had been confirmed by a rough and wild laughter. A man's silhouette was riding a tall horse. He held a long saber in his hand and shouted like a thunderclap. The man and his horse fell from the sky, and rushed into Bai Chang Tian's vanguard like a god. Bai Chang Tian, your grandpa Wu has arrived. Was Wu Kuangyun. He waved his saber and countless heads soared into the sky along with waves of blood. This was the prelude to a massacre. Wu Kuangyun's innate divine strength displayed an unparalleled might in such a chaotic battle. He wasn't an expert, but he was a valiant general in this kind of battle. He rushed into the enemy's ranks with his horse in tow. Then he brandished his broadsword a dozen times and cleared the enemy's ranks. He then tore open a gap in the enemy's ranks. Then the ironclad soldiers rushed in from behind him like wolves and tigers. Kill them all. Tai Butian's voice resounded, don't look back. We must kill our way to the rear of Bai Chang Tian's army even if we die. Kill. Follow me. Charge. Wu Kuangyun looked up to the sky and shouted. He knew that victory or defeat would be decided in this one move. He raised his saber and clamped his legs on the horse's belly. He took the lead to kill his way in. Then 10,000 soldiers followed him and crazily killed their way in. The 50,000 vanguard soldiers were like a huge nail. They heavily wedged into the enemy's ranks with an indomitable will. Then the 300,000 soldiers rushed in like a tsunami. Bai Chang Tian's orders couldn't be transmitted in this chaotic battlefield. He was in despair. Supreme Commander, let's go. The deputy rushed over with his face full of blood. Go. Bai Chang Tian smiled sadly. Where should we go? He turned his head to look at his troops. They were crowded in the densest places. Perhaps they couldn't even pull out their sabers. The rear of the 200,000-strong army hadn't received any news. They were still moving forward in a steady stream. It's over. Bai Chang Tian smiled miserably. I can't believe that Bai Chang Tian will be defeated here. He swept his eyes around and saw that Wu Kuangyun's entire body was bathed in blood. He wasn't far from him. His troops had lost their fighting spirit. They were screaming like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. They couldn't even flee in all directions. They could only stretch their necks to be slaughtered. Defeated. Moreover, it was a crushing defeat. From the looks of it, this battle was already destined to end in total annihilation. Bai Chang Tian laughed wildly. His voice was full of despair. He pulled out his sword with his right hand and said sadly, "It's my fault." The long sword turned around and rushed into Bai Chang Tian's heart with a wisp of flowing light. The White Tiger General, one of the 10 Dragon and Tiger Generals, chose to use his own life as an apology. Before the war ends, don't take any prisoners. Pierce through him as fast as you can. Tai Butian also didn't expect that this White Tiger General would be trapped on such a narrow mountain path with no way forward or retreat. She had wrapped him up like a dumpling. Such a heaven-sent opportunity made Tai Butian immediately realize that this could be an unprecedentedly brilliant victory. Therefore, he made a prompt decision and immediately gave another order. Don't take prisoners. If they were to release the troops to collect the captives now, it would undoubtedly delay the time of victory. Furthermore, the other party was now squeezed into a group and didn't even have a chance to retaliate. If he didn't grab hold of this opportunity, he would really be a fool. The Ironclad Grass team was like a huge roller rolling over an uneven road. After passing through, it was a flat stretch of land. The situation was under control. Chu Yang had fled to the Great Ba Mountain by now. This place was already 8,000 miles away from the prefecture. Along the way, Chu Yang had been chased by the Golden Horse Riders Department's people countless times. He had been injured countless times, and had been on the brink of despair countless times. Chu Yang's back still had the mark of being hit by Jing Minghun's palm. If it weren't for the sword spirit, Chu Yang would have been buried in this barren mountain. The scars on Chu Yang's body had increased by at least 80 along the way. Every one of them was a ghastly sight. Even the incomparably small Vitality spring water couldn't heal him immediately. The old wounds hadn't healed yet, but new ones had come. Even though the Tribulation Sword had the power to devour living beings, Chu Yang had almost reached the point of exhaustion. Jing Minghun hated Chu Yang to the core. Chu Yang had lured nearly 100,000 wolves out of the 1,000-layered forest. More than 100 experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department had chased after Chu Yang. Nearly 300 of them had lost their lives to the wolves. Baidu Cheba world-defying heavens, Jing Minghun had exhausted all his means. He had exhausted all his strength to lead the remaining 300 people out of the forest. Everyone was injured. Even Jing Minghun's body had 3 or 4 bite marks from the wolves. What about the others? A rough calculation showed that King of Hell Chu had lost more than 100 experts since he had escaped from the province. They hadn't fought him yet. These people were martial great masters and above. They had been carefully selected by Jing Minghun. Losing even one of them was an irreparable loss. Jing Minghun's lungs were bursting with anger. However, he had suffered such losses in such a short period of time. He had chased after Chu Yang without caring about his own safety. Chu Yang was gasping for breath as he leaned against a tree. He was enjoying this rare tranquility. He had used all kinds of tricks to get rid of Jing Minghun's pursuit. And he had arrived here. He had been beaten up for the past few days. His original method of concealing his whereabouts had become useless these days. He didn't have enough time to conceal the orchid fragrance on his body. Jing Minghun had chased after him without rest or sleep. He would rather exhaust his men to death than kill Chu Yang. This had left King of Hell Chu in a very difficult situation. The sword spirit had reminded Chu Yang 3 days ago, the Jade Snow Spirit ginseng has ripened. You can take it now. However, Chu Yang hadn't had the time to take the medicine for the past 3 days and 3 nights. The enormous medicinal efficacy stored by the sword spirit in his body had been decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. They had almost reached the bottom at present. They had been used to heal his injuries and support his body. Chu Yang had almost given up countless times. He hadn't even had the time to take a breath during that time. However, Chu Yang's heart began to ache as soon as he closed his eyes. Mo Qingwu was standing in the white snow. She was wearing a red dress. She was looking at him with deep affection and hidden bitterness. She then softly asked, "Chu Yang, have you given up?" Therefore Chu Yang immediately woke up. He almost suffocated and took a few deep breaths. Mo Qingwu was wearing a red dress. She had sparkling and translucent tears in her eyes. She looked at Chu Yang pitifully and pursed her lips. It seemed as if she would cry at any time. She then sobbed and said, "Brother Chu Yang, when will you come to pick me up? Little Wu is very happy here. I miss you." Therefore Chu Yang was sweating profusely. He woke up with a start. Chu Yang's will to live had suddenly burst out countless times in desperate situations. This had shocked Jing Minghun. However, it had also increased Jing Minghun's determination to get rid of Chu Yang. Chu Yang had finally shaken off Jing Minghun. However, he had paid the price of a broken arm. Chu Yang had made rapid progress. In fact, he had made great progress. However, there was still an unreachable gap between him and a peak king-level expert like Jing Minghun. He was the master of Tribulation Sword. However, he couldn't do anything to Jing Minghun at such a distance. He could kill a first-grade king-level expert and a second-grade king-level expert. Even a third-grade king-level expert or a fourth-grade king-level expert could be killed if Chu Yang used a trick. However, he was still powerless against a peak king-level expert. Every step of this 8,000 miles journey had been filled with danger. It hadn't been easy for him to obtain less than 2 hours of time. This period of time was extremely precious. The sword spirit immediately took out the Jade Snow Spirit ginseng. Chu Yang closed his eyes and gasped for breath. He didn't wait for his breathing to stabilize. He felt an ice-cold flow of spirit energy rush into his stomach with a loud rumble. It rushed into his meridians. Therefore, the sword spirit quietly released his control over Chu Yang's 5 internal organs when this flow of spirit energy reached a certain point. The spirit energy poured into his body. Chu Yang's entire body trembled. He tightly wrinkled his brows. He was biting his black robe. However, it had already been bitten to pieces. The most important thing to take the Jade Snow Spirit Ginseng was to absorb its medicinal efficacies for one's own use. His 5 internal organs had been damaged, so they had to be slowly repaired. Therefore it would take time. Moreover, it wouldn't take a short time. 4 hours of time might be enough or not. However, Chu Yang had no other choice. He would die if he didn't take the Jade Snow Spirit Ginseng. The sword spirit carefully guided the spirit energy. He tried his best to transform it into a gentle flow of spirit energy. It nourished and repaired Chu Yang's 5 internal organs. The sword spirit completely released the sword energy in the end. He couldn't allow any carelessness at this point. The spirit energy slowly poured into Chu Yang's body. The serious injuries of Chu Yang's internal organs slowly improved under the sword spirit's control. They slowly healed and recovered. More than half of them had been restored. There was only a little bit left. Chu Yang would become a normal person as long as his internal organs were restored. However, his blood vessels and meridians were unobstructed. Moreover, his internal organs were being restored. Diwu Qingrou's destroying soul and breaking heart palm finally broke out. A strong orchid fragrance slowly floated out and spread in all directions. However, Chu Yang didn't know anything about all this. He was still in deep meditation. In other words, he was in a kind of deep sleep. Moreover, he was being hypnotized. 3 hours had already passed. Chu Yang was about to succeed. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard from all directions. It was the low whining sound of the spirit creature. It was getting closer and closer. In the dense forest in several directions, the branches of the trees swayed at the same time. Someone was approaching. The experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department had finally found Chu Yang's hiding place under the guidance of the orchid fragrance. Jing Minghun was rushing over from afar. His hair was disheveled and his face was fierce. "Where is it?" Reporting to King Level Expert, "It's in front. The orchid fragrance is coming from the valley ahead. How many people are rushing over? Don't alert the enemy." Yes. The subordinates also have this thought. Moreover, it's somewhat unusual this time. We didn't see anything strange until we got close to the valley. The opposite party didn't react. I suspect that it might be an orchid. Let's go and take a look. Chapter 355. Chu Yang had reached a critical juncture. The final juncture. More than 50 experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department had arrived here. They slowly crept towards the center of Chu Yang's position from all directions. Chu Yang closed his eyes and quietly waited for the sword spirit to repair the last gap. One more thing, one more thing, one more thing, shwa. Jing Minghun fell from the sky like a meteor. He circled 3 times over the valley and finally found Chu Yang under a small pine tree. He couldn't help but expose a cruel smile on his face. "King of Hell Chu, you've finally fallen into my hands." Jing Minghun felt that he couldn't continue this pursuit any longer. He was exhausted to death. Jing Minghun believed that Chu Yang was like a lamp that had run out of oil. In fact, Jing Minghun was surprised that Chu Yang had been able to hold on for so long. Others didn't know, but Jing Minghun was well aware of all the wounds on Chu Yang's body. Chu Yang had been hit by Diwu Qingrou's destroying soul and breaking heart palm during this period of time. Then he had fled for thousands of miles. Then he had killed his way through an army of 10,000 soldiers. He had received 3 serious arrow wounds and several sword wounds. His internal organs must have been in a mess by now. Jing Minghun had led his subordinates to fight with him several times. And he had added at least 10 new and old wounds to Chu Yang's body. None of them were light. In fact, such an injury could have been fatal even if it had been on the body of a middle-grade king-level expert. However, it seemed that King of Hell Chu couldn't be beaten to death. He couldn't bear it any longer. Then he started to heal. Jing Minghun couldn't help but shout as he recalled the thrilling journey. Miracle. No matter how miraculous it is, King of Hell Chu can't hold on any longer. He's finally going to fall into my hands. He's going to pay the price for all the things he's done. He's going to pay for all the blood debts he's incurred. Jing Minghun let out a deep and sinister laugh. He arrived in front of Chu Yang with a schwa sound. He stretched out his big hand and ferociously tried to grab Chu Yang. Chu Yang's eyes suddenly opened at this moment. 2 bright lights flashed in his eyes as he fixed them on Jing Minghun's hand. At this time, the sword spirit had finished his work. Chu Yang's internal organs were completely restored. The power of the Jade Snow Spirit Ginseng was indeed the creation of heaven and earth. Jing Minghun was shocked. Is this a trap? However, he gritted his teeth and continued to attack. In just a moment he had figured it out. Chu Yang didn't dare to set up any traps in such a situation. Not to mention putting himself in danger to set up a trap. The only possibility was that Chu Yang was bluffing. I'm a veteran of the Jianghu. Do you think you can scare me away by bluffing? What a joke. Just as this palm was about to touch Chu Yang's body, a strong wind blew against Chu Yang's face, causing the hair on Chu Yang's forehead to flutter. Chu Yang coldly looked at Jing Menghun's palm. Then he suddenly placed his right hand horizontally in front of his chest. His palm faced outwards and fiercely met Jing Menghun's palm head-on. Jing Menghun was overjoyed. He increased the strength of his palm. He thought, even if you're a genius, even if you have some martial arts skills, you're far inferior to me. Moreover, you're an arrow at the end of its flight. How can you be my opponent? You're courting death if you want to meet my palm head-on. In the blink of an eye, the two palms violently collided with each other with a loud bang. A loud bang was heard. Chu Yang somersaulted backwards and spat out a mouthful of blood. His internal organs had almost been ruptured again. His whole body was in so much pain that he felt as if it wasn't his own body. He endured the pain and jumped to the top of a tree. However, Chu Yang wasn't the most tragic one. It was Jing Menghun. Jing Menghun had never imagined that such a thing would happen under such circumstances. Jing Menghun suddenly felt that something was wrong when his palms collided with Chu Yang's. He didn't know when his opponent's palm had turned into a sharp sword. It pierced his palm with irresistible force. Jing Menghun was startled. He felt severe pain. He immediately withdrew his hand. His body drifted away like smoke. His right hand was dripping with blood. His opponent's sword had pierced his palm. He had retreated a few steps, but the sword had already pierced his arm. It had pierced his elbow. The bones of half of his arm had been shattered. Jing Menghun suddenly woke up from a dream, and issued an earth-shattering scream. Ah! Thump. He was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. He clutched his right hand. He was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that the other party's right hand would suddenly turn into a sword. Moreover, he was already at the peak of the king level. It could be said that his body was invulnerable. Even those legendary godly weapons would only be able to harm him if they were in the hands of the same level of manpower. Chu Yang's martial strength was such that he wouldn't necessarily be able to injure him even if he had a divine weapon in his hand. However, the truth was so bizarre. Not only had Chu Yang injured him, but he had injured him under impossible circumstances. Moreover, the injury was extremely serious. Jing Menghun retreated 17 feet. He immediately felt that his arm had lost its vitality from the elbow down. This arm was already dead. It no longer had any connection with his body. This made Jing Menghun feel so much pain that he wished he was dead. However, he couldn't understand it. Jing Menghun was proficient in medicine. So, he knew that even if his arm was chopped off and separated from his body, it could be reattached as long as there was a divine doctor by his side. It wouldn't be as convenient as it used to be, but it wouldn't be a disability at least. Why did he lose his vitality after being stabbed by his opponent's sword? Catch him. Catch him. Catch him. Wahaha. Jing Menghun held his arm as he crazily ordered. His face was ferocious and his heart was bleeding. His hair was disheveled. The experts of the Golden Horse Riders department looked at the crazy king-level expert. Their brains short-circuited and they were almost petrified. How could such an unforeseen event happen so suddenly? They heard Jing Menghun's crazy shouts. They seemed to have woken up from a dream. They shouted and chased after him. They had planned to besiege the king-level expert in case he failed. After all, they hadn't found King of Hell Chu's specific location before Jing Menghun's arrival. However, the king-level expert had found King of Hell Chu as soon as he had arrived. Everyone admired him. A king-level expert is a king-level expert. It's really the fart of a local lord. It's extraordinary. He has a skill. He has a bottle of cinnamon on his buttocks. Everyone was about to sing praises when they saw that King of Hell Chu was about to be captured. However, an old hen turned into a duck in the blink of an eye. Moreover, the cooked duck flapped its wings and flew away. Then the king-level expert started to scream in pain. Everyone felt as if they were in a dream. They felt that this was too fucking outrageous. Chu Yang's blood was surging in his chest. He felt extremely uncomfortable. Chu Yang had used the Calamity Sword to injure Jing Menghun when he was least expecting it. This had made Jing Menghun withdraw most of his strength. However, Jing Menghun had still released a part of his strength. Blood flowed from the corner of Chu Yang's mouth. His body almost fell from midair. However, he was intercepted by the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department after he had fled for more than 300 feet. Then people's shadows flickered from all directions. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Chu Yang frowned. He withdrew his sword. The sword flickered for a while. Bang, bang, bang. 3 almost inaudible sounds were heard. The 3 sections of the Calamity Sword sword point, sword edge, and sword edge were attached to his body at the same time. His murderous aura surged in an instant. Chu Yang's body spun around. He hadn't even landed on the ground when he roared, 1 point of coldness, 10,000 feet of brilliance. With a bang, this sword shot up into the night sky like fireworks, blooming with a loud bang. 10,000 sword lights and 10,000 sword energies rushed out at the same time. The 2 sides had been fighting for a long time. So, the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department knew how powerful this move was. So, they dodged one after another. What harm is there in blocking the entire world? Chu Yang transformed into a bright ball of light along with his sword. He rushed towards the densest part of the crowd like a meteor. Baidu Cheba world-defying heavens, the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department felt that something was amiss when they saw these 2 moves. Chu Yang's moves had become more and more skillful after many battles. But his body had been riddled with scars and injuries. So, the power of his moves had been getting weaker and weaker. However, the momentum of these 2 moves had clearly shown that his martial power had made great progress. Could it be that King of Hell Chu has recovered to his peak? If that's the case, then no one is a match for him except for king-level expert Jing. Drip blood. Drip blood. Jing Minghun crazily shouted from a distance. Suddenly, someone's complexion turned resolute. He wielded his sword and pounced towards Chu Yang. 1 person moves and 100 people follow. This is how it is. No one would understand if there was no one to take the lead. But the others would step forward dauntlessly if someone stood out. Jing Minghun looked up to the sky and roared from a distance. Then he chopped off his right arm from the elbow with a schwa sound. Half of his arm fell to the ground with a puff sound. But not much blood flowed out from the wound. King of Hell Chu, your cultivation technique is so vicious. Jing Minghun was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He hadn't felt any pain since his arm had been chopped off. It was obvious that the vitality of this half of his arm had been extinguished. Jing Minghun hurriedly stopped the bleeding on his arm. Then he shouted loudly and chased after Chu Yang. The eyes of this peak-level king-level expert had turned completely red. Chu Yang fiercely exchanged moves with more than a dozen experts in midair. Everyone scattered with a loud bang. 3 or 4 people had bright flowers of blood spurting out of their chests, shoulders, thighs and other places. Chu Yang snorted. His face was as cold as ice. He looked at the shadows of people rushing towards him from all directions. Then he fiercely bounced his feet. His long sword vibrated and issued a dragon's cry. He shouted, "A sharp will buried deep will not change." He shook his long sword and shouted again, "Gather the wind and clouds to become the emperor." Then he fiercely rushed forward. His hands didn't stop moving. He crazily swung his long sword and used the last 4 moves of Calamity Sword. The sword's edge has been famous since ancient times. The wind and clouds move unhindered from the west to the east. The sun and the moon act as the thunder in my body. Then he shouted loudly, "Behead the entire world without retracting the blade." Countless sword energies gathered together in the sky. It was as if the sun had suddenly exploded. The area within a radius of 10 feet was filled with cold and destructive sword energies. Quick dodge. Jing Minghun anxiously shouted as he rushed over. Everyone dodged. Chapter 356. Jing Ming shouted and chased after him. However, she only saw the trees in the jungle rustling. Then, a black shadow with a strong orchid fragrance disappeared into the distance with a schwa sound. Only that wild laughter was still echoing in the air. Jing Ming roared and followed closely behind. Then she disappeared into the jungle with a schwa sound. The experts of Golden Horse Riders Department looked at each other. They left 3 people behind to wait for the newcomers. Then they also chased after Chu Yang into the jungle. It was yet another round of pursuit. However, even Jing Ming didn't dare to say that she would win this time. King of Hell Chu's methods were very unpredictable. It was impossible to guard against them. He was obviously only a revered sword artist. However, his methods were enough to kill a king-level expert. Even Jing Ming had been crippled by him. So, there was no need to talk about other people. Therefore Jing Ming released an invisible falcon while chasing after Chu Yang. Jing Ming became more and more impatient. King of Hell Chu had unwittingly escaped. It was a terrifying journey. If someone had told Jing Ming that King of Hell Chu could escape 8,000 miles away when they were leaving the Tsong prefecture, Jing Ming would have slapped that person's face and said, "What a bastard." However, Jing Ming didn't think so anymore. In fact, she felt admiration and fear for King of Hell Chu from the bottom of her heart. Jing Ming knew that she wouldn't be able to act like King of Hell Chu even if she was a King of Hell level expert if she were in Chu Yang's shoes. King of Hell Chu had framed people, ambushed people, and used mountains, rivers, wild beasts and people's hearts. He had used everything he could. All kinds of strange and wonderful ideas were breathtaking. Moreover, King of Hell Chu's endurance and tenacity were something that Jing Ming had never seen in her life. Chu Yang had the typical style of a desperado. But he had evolved it into a chic and unrestrained style. Many times, Jing Ming even had this thought: to be enemies with such a person in this life is really my greatest sorrow. King of Hell Chu's endless attack methods had made Jing Ming wary. Therefore he made a prompt decision to send a message to the front line. He called for the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department to rush over and intercept King of Hell Chu from the opposite side. After all, he had successfully traversed 8,000 miles out of a total of 13,000 miles. Taking everything into account, the remaining journey was only 5,000 miles. This was still an insurmountable and distant journey for an ordinary person. But this wasn't necessarily the case for King of Hell Chu. Since he had already traversed 8,000 miles, what was the point of traversing another 5,000 miles? Jing Ming didn't intend to use the military's Golden Horse Riders Department. But now he had no choice. After all, even Diwu Qingro wouldn't be able to bear the consequences if King of Hell Chu were to join forces with the Iron Cloud's army. King of Hell Chu has overheard too many military secrets. Moreover, the poisons and so on were all double-edged swords. If he could use it, so could the other party. Countless experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department arrived one after another following Jing Ming's summons. This had weakened the fighting strength of the Great Zhao's army to a certain extent. But it had also brought an indescribable pressure to Chu Yang. This made the return journey even more difficult for them to walk on. Tai Bu Tian had won a big victory. Bai Chang Tian's army of 500,000 had been destroyed. Thousands of people had died in the internal strife. And hundreds of thousands of people had been killed on the spot. Blood had flowed like a river in the valley. The remaining 300,000 people had been captured. The degree of glory of this big victory was rarely seen even in the past 10 years of war between the two countries. Tai Bu Tian's side had suffered less than 20,000 casualties. However, such a big victory had been achieved with such a large number of troops. And it had been achieved with such a small number of casualties. It was simply unprecedented. Tai Bu Tian took advantage of the aftermath of this victory, and pushed the defensive line forward by 500 miles. Then he set up a camp outside the valley. Under Tai Bu Tian's command, this encampment of the marching army became an excellent camp for mutual assistance. It was undoubtedly superior to Wu Kuangyun's. Moreover, Tai Bu Tian had also taken into account the hidden concern of the three-pronged army, the issue of mutual cooperation. He had adopted the method of interspersing the camps. And this hidden concern had disappeared without a trace. This had made Wu Kuangyun gasp in admiration. Tai Bu Tian had sent Wu Kuangyun to escort the 300,000 prisoners to Tai Longqing after everything was done. It would have been impossible to digest them here. And it would have been easy to cause trouble if they had stayed here for a long time. As for Tai Longqing, when he heard that Tai Budian had achieved such a glorious result, he couldn't help but sigh. Then he laughed out loud. Even he himself couldn't understand what kind of state of mind he was in. In short, it was very complicated. He was very happy. However, he was also very scared. Wu Kuangyun had escorted the prisoners to Tai Longqing. Tai Longqing had seen Wu Kuangyun's proud hairy face. And he had felt an evil fire burning in his belly. Wu Kuangyun entered the military camp with his head held high. It seemed as if he had made a great contribution. He was thick-skinned and bulging his belly. He waved his hands and waved his arms at everyone. The smile on his face was like a blooming flower. His feet unconsciously strode forward. He felt that he was very proper. "Yo, old Wu, you're awesome. 300,000 prisoners." A general laughed out loud and said with jealousy. Wu Kuangyun looked up to the sky. He shook his head and wagged his tail as he said, There. It's just eso-so." Ah. His mouth had said eso-so. But he couldn't hide his pride any longer. He was so modest that he even laughed complacently. The generals curled their lips. They felt somewhat stifled in their hearts as they looked at Wu Kuangyun's proud appearance. But he has indeed achieved a great merit. So it's nothing to be proud of. 300,000 prisoners. There are so many generals present. Who has ever captured 300,000 prisoners in a single battle? Not even one. Ha, it's just a small matter this time. Wu Kuangyun waved his hand. He laughed so hard that his eyebrows couldn't be seen. Look, it's spectacular, isn't it? 300,000, hee hee, it's just a small matter. Next time it'll be more than this. Hee, how is it? You haven't seen it before, right? Fuck. I'm talking about you. Walk faster. Damn it. Then he rushed over and kicked a prisoner's buttocks. He cursed, you're a prisoner. You should act like a prisoner. Motherfucker. Everyone. He raised his voice. Everyone. My fellow comrades. How is it? It's too easy. The general's facial muscles twitched. They wished that they could swarm this show-off guy and beat him to the ground. Wu Kuangyun, you're very powerful. You've captured 300,000 prisoners. Not bad, not bad. Tai Longqing appeared in front of Wu Kuangyun with his hands behind his back. You're flattering me? Supreme Commander. Supreme Commander this, that, it's just SOSO. Wu Kuangyun had just opened his mouth when he realized that it was Tai Longqing. He hastily stopped boasting. But then he felt that such a great merit. Even if he didn't boast, he still had to go. So he couldn't help but raise his tail. Well, this old man will reward you well this time. Tai Longqing calmly said. His voice was very cautious. That's what I should do. Thank you, Supreme Commander. Wu Kuangyun didn't know which way was north. Men come. Tai Longqing shouted loudly. I'm sorry. Wu Kuangyun rubbed his hands and glanced greedily at Tai Longqing. He said with a bashful smile, Supreme Commander, it's enough to avoid jealousy. Although this merit is not small, but this, comrades must be united, or you can allocate 800,000 for military expenses, As for the rest, no matter what Supreme Commander rewards me, I will accept it with a smile. You can rest assured that they won't be jealous of your reward this time. Tai Longqing calmly said. Wu Kuangyun didn't know that a disaster was about to befall him. He grinned and said arrogantly, That's good. Everyone old Wu will be rich this time. Men. Take down this undisciplined bastard who acts without permission, ignores military regulations, and despises his superiors. Tai Longqing's words caused Wu Kuangyun's body to sway a couple of times. It was as if a bolt from the blue had struck his ears. Some of the nearby officers couldn't help but laugh. Supreme Commander. Wu Kuangyun was dumbfounded. Even in his wildest dreams, he had never imagined that he would be able to enjoy such a reward. Take him down. Tai Longqing's voice was stern. Kill anyone who dares to resist. Suddenly, a group of executioners swarmed forward. They nimbly tied up Supreme Commander Wu Kuangyun and threw him on the ground like a dead pig. Beat him. Tai Longqing was furious. He pointed his finger and said, Beat him. Beat him 10 times. Supreme Commander, why is this happening? Wu Kuangyun was dumbfounded. He kept on shouting. The other generals surrounded him as if they were watching a monkey show. Wow, isn't this Supreme Commander Wu? Yes, isn't this the great meritorious General Wu? But why is he being beaten? Yes, why is he being beaten? Then they all laughed in unison. After the 10 beatings, Tai Longqing picked up Wu Kuangyun and strode back to the commander's tent. He threw him on the ground and shouted, Bastard! There's no one else in this world who's more of a bastard than you. Supreme Commander. I'm innocent. Wu Kuangyun groaned. His face was full of pain. His skin was rough and his flesh was thick. But these 10 beatings weren't easy to endure. Even though he had already shown mercy, he was still beaten to the point where 1 Buddha was born, 2 Buddhas ascended to the heavens, and 3 Buddhas were nesting. You're innocent? Let me ask you. What did I tell you when you set out from here? I didn't expect that you would start to disobey my orders. And you've turned a deaf ear to my words? And you've even won? Do you know that you would have been dismembered if you hadn't won? Tai Longqing was furious. Chapter 357. The situation this time was more dangerous than any of the previous times. Chu Yang had been killing his way through. He had been constantly setting up ambushes. He had been using tricks and schemes. He had finally managed to break into the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect after several battles. Everyone knew that the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect was the border between Great Jiao and Iron Cloud. Chu Yang would enter Iron Cloud's territory as long as he crossed this mountain range. At that time, the Golden Horse Riders Department wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Therefore, the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department who had been recruited by Jing Menghun had gathered here. There were several thousand of them. Each of them was an expert. Some of them were hiding in the dark. They had already set up ambushes. Some of them were waiting for King of Hell Chu at various points. Some of them were waiting in the open or in the dark. Jing Menghun had recruited more than 1,000 experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department to chase after King of Hell Chu. Chu Yang had broken into the range of Beyond the Heavens sect's first garden with bruises all over his body. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Chu Yang had felt relieved when he had seen this familiar mountain range. He had felt so relieved that he had collapsed. Fortunately, he had persevered. That was because the first garden of Beyond the Heavens sect was now an empty shell. There was no one inside. This place was only 400 to 500 kilometers away from the place where Tai Butian was looking at. However, these 400 to 500 kilometers had cut off all communication between the two sides. Chu Yang thought that Tai Butian was still in the capital. He didn't know that Tai Butian had already arrived at the front line. Tai Butian thought that Chu Yang was still thousands of kilometers away. He didn't expect that Chu Yang had already arrived at such a close place. If Tai Butian knew about this, he would have immediately sent an army of 500,000 to meet him. He would have brought Chu Yang back safely even if he had to fight to the last man. Unfortunately, he didn't know. Chu Yang's vision was almost blurred as he entered Beyond the Heavens sect. He was already exhausted. Far away on the official road of Great Jiao, the fluttering banners covered the sky and covered the earth. They almost blocked the sunlight. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were slowly moving forward. It seemed as if a huge dragon was slowly swimming in this vast land. A bright yellow carriage was in the middle of the troops. It was full of rich and luxurious aura. Simple curtains were hanging around the carriage. This carriage seemed to have attracted everyone's attention. It was as if the slow movement of this carriage was filled with a calm demeanor compared to the other carriages. Diwu Qingro reclined on the cushion of the carriage. His face carried a warm and confident smile. He indifferently looked at the crowd on both sides of the road. His eyes seemed to be mixed with ice and snow. They were calm and sharp. On both sides of the road, the officials bowed to the ground, respectfully sending off Prime Minister Diwu. The people lined the streets to send him off with great momentum. However, this also slowed down the march of the army. Diwu Qingrou's expression was warm, but his heart was very impatient. Furthermore, the grand expedition ceremony had already made him unhappy. He was even more annoyed by this kind of people who lined the streets to send off his younger brothers to battle. Especially when they were already 3,000 miles away from this place, there were still officials who wanted to flatter him and mobilize the people to send him off. This made Diwu Qingrou even more unhappy. But there was nothing he could do. This was because he knew that although all of this was just a formality, it was necessary. It was also a way to mobilize the people. The hidden power of today's ceremony would be revealed when news of victory would arrive in the future, or when the people would be required to contribute their strength. This was an extremely huge force. Even the monarch of a nation couldn't deny the power of the people's hearts. Therefore he could only accept it. Moreover, he had to show his best attitude. The army slowly moved forward. Its speed wasn't fast. Diwu Qingrou sat in the well-ventilated carriage. He had an elegant appearance, a calm smile, a wise and far-sighted gaze and a confident smile. Everyone who saw Prime Minister Diwu for the first time would admire him greatly. Only such a person would be able to defeat Iron Cloud, sweep across the world, and establish Great Jiao's everlasting foundation. However, Diwu Qingrou's thoughts had already drifted far away. He remembered the time when he had received the news of Jing Menghun and Wang Tinglong's separation. He had hated them for failing to meet his expectations, but he had been helpless. Jing Menghun had the strength of a king-level expert. Could be said that his strength was at the peak of the lower three heavens. But his brain was somewhat rigid. Nothing particularly big had happened in the past. So Jing Menghun had handled it with ease. However, the matter of chasing King of Hell Chu had fully reflected the limitations of Jing Menghun's ability. He was a first-grade king-level expert. But he was still a Jianghu man. He had never regarded himself as an official of the imperial court. Nor had he integrated himself into Great Jiao's system. He had always been outside. Therefore, even though he was a first-grade king-level expert, His highest achievement in life was merely to control the Golden Horse Riders department. Moreover, his ability had begun to be stretched ever since he had lost the assistance of the other 3 king-level experts. How could King of Hell Chu have escaped thousands of miles away if they had mobilized all their forces to capture him? Wouldn't it be a big joke if they had let King of Hell Chu escape with the entire nation's strength? However, Diwu Qingro didn't say anything about this, because he knew that whatever he said would be superfluous. A good plan requires the ability of the person who carries it out. Jing Minghun obviously isn't capable, so there's no need to say anything. Capturing King of Hell Chu is naturally good. Even if I can't capture him, Diwu Qingro will defeat King of Hell Chu on the battlefield. It will be a piece of cake for me at that time. The other matter was Wang Tinglong. Diwu Qingro was even more speechless when it came to General Tinglong, one of the 10 Dragon Tiger generals. Diwu Qingro heaved a long sigh after he had read Wang Tinglong's military report. He didn't speak for a long time. Wang Tinglong's military report had been very objective. He hadn't complained to the Golden Horse Riders department. He had simply described the facts. It was mixed with a little anger. But it could be ignored if one didn't pay attention. However, Diwu Qingro wasn't angry because of this matter. He had only replied to Wang Tinglong's letter. He had wearily closed his eyes. He didn't want to hear any news about this matter. It's understandable that you feel resentful and relieved after losing this battle. But what's the reason for this? Or is it because of you? You may have arrived a little late. But you didn't do anything wrong. You are a man of war. How can you not know that there is a limit to tension and relaxation? Can't you eat an army of 10,000 in batches? Must you cook them all in one pot to swallow them? It's a pity that you lost because of this. What's the matter with your arrogance and dullness? One side is a joke. Both sides are the laughingstock of the ages. Don't mention it. King of Hell Chu escaped. Should I blame you or him? It's understandable that Jing Menghun went late. But your stupidity can't be forgiven. Why must you eat an army of 10,000 at the same time? Both sides made mistakes at the same time. It's a laughingstock of the ages. And you still have the face to talk about it in front of me? Well, that's the gist of it. I heard that Wang Tinglong was ashamed after receiving this letter. In fact, he vomited blood on the spot. However, he vomited blood. But it couldn't compare to the depression in Diwu Qingro's heart. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There were obstructions in the front and pursuers in the back. Their forces were hundreds or even thousands of times stronger than King of Hell Chu's. Such a good opportunity to capture King of Hell Chu has been wasted. Moreover, both sides are blaming each other after wasting it. They are blaming each other. But Diwu Qingro wouldn't have been able to restrain himself if his self-restraint wasn't so good. He would have cursed, "Blame your mother, you 2 bastards. One is a tortoise and the other is a turtle. You're so stupid that you're on the floor. I'll let you enter the palace if you continue to blabber." Of course, Diwu Qingro would have never cursed it out loud with his self-restraint. But this didn't mean that he didn't think so. In fact, he really wanted to catch these 2 people and crush them to death. Fuck. Diwu Qingro narrowed his eyes and said in his heart. Diwu Qingro put down the curtains on all sides and closed his eyes to rest. His thoughts had already drifted to the battlefield thousands of miles away. Tai Long Cheng, my old rival. I, Diwu Qingro, have come. But I won't play any games with you this time. I will defeat you in one fell swoop. I will crush you. Tai Butian, I will drag you down from the throne. I will turn you into a captive or a corpse. I will let you know that the throne of the human world isn't easy to sit on. King of Hell Chu, Diwu Qingro, will look forward to meeting you on the battlefield if you don't die. I will let you experience my methods. I will let you know that you are far inferior to me in terms of intelligence and martial arts. This world will tremble in my hands. Unification. Diwu Qingro's body swayed up and down along with the carriage. The dense aura between his eyebrows made the surroundings of the carriage feel chilly even though it was a hot summer day. Chu Yang rushed into the beyond the mountain tower like a gust of wind. His super-strong spirit sense had sensed that this seemingly tranquil mountain forest was filled with a dangerous aura that could make one's heart palpitate. This kind of dangerous aura made Chu Yang's mind, which was about to relax, become extremely alert again. He was exhausted to death. But he didn't dare to take a deep breath. Dozens of external injuries had been added to Chu Yang's body during this chase. The heaviest injury had almost chopped off his leg. But he had dragged it and escaped from the encirclement. Moreover, he had tried his best to prevent his internal organs from being seriously shaken. His internal organs had gradually returned to normal. The orchid smell that had been emitted from his body had also gradually begun to dissipate and weaken. There was still a faint smell, but it didn't affect the overall situation. Otherwise, this journey would have been more and more thrilling. Perhaps he would have been captured by now. Jing Minghun was also puzzled as to why the orchid smell had gradually weakened during this intense chase. Chapter 358. Chu Yang tried his best to adjust his breathing. His body lay motionless in a sparse patch of grass. He used a few trees to conceal his body. I must do the opposite at this time. I must catch the enemy off guard. Only then can I have a chance of survival. Chu Yang would be consigned to eternal damnation if he made even the slightest mistake. The pursuers were almost right behind him and could discover him at any time. But Chu Yang still chose to hide in this patch of grass where he could be easily discovered. The terrain here was very flat, so it would have been easy to find him. However, the people of the Golden Horse Riders Department knew that King of Hell Chu was very crafty. So, everyone was looking at the dark corners of the mountain forest with their eyes wide open. They were looking at the strange peaks and strange rocks. They were looking at the dense forest. Therefore, no one was paying attention to these ordinary places. That was the human psychology. However, this had also given Chu Yang a chance of survival. Heaven never bars one's way. You can find a way out as long as you are bold and careful. You can make use of everything around you. Even if it's a place of certain death, you can still find a way out. But how many people can do this in this world? Chu Yang slowly let out a sigh of relief. He felt the soreness all over his body. He also felt the burning pain from nearly 30 wounds that hadn't healed yet. He tried his best to restrain his aura. He used his divine sense to control his pores. He didn't want the smell of blood to spread out too obviously. At the same time, the sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind was pouring the medicinal efficacies into Chu Yang's body at a crazy speed. It had been complaining that Chu Yang had accumulated too much medicinal efficacies before. Absorbing too much medicinal efficacies wasn't good for cultivation. However, it was afraid that Chu Yang couldn't absorb more medicinal efficacies now. It even began to complain, the stored medicinal efficacies are too little. It's not enough. He felt that his strength had recovered by 30%. His stiff body also slowly regained some vitality. His thunder-like heartbeat also gradually calmed down. Chu Yang had to change his hiding place. This place is only temporarily safe. Maybe someone will find me if they turn around and look at me. The pursuers will see my exposed buttocks if they catch up with me at this time. However, his body was already in a terrible state. The little bit of strength he had recovered did not allow him to do any big movements. Especially after this short rest, that kind of exhaustion almost made his divine soul a little dazed. Fortunately, he had come here when he was at the end of his rope. This was beyond the Heavens sect, and it could be said that it was her maiden home. Although there were many people here who could be more familiar with the terrain than her, Chu Yang comforted himself. He bent his body like a cat and agilely rolled over. Then he propped his elbows on the ground and quickly moved horizontally from the tip of the grass. This kind of lateral movement also required skill. Now he could not jump, nor could he touch the grass to make a rustling sound, for fear that someone would hear him and the matter would be over. However, he couldn't support his body too high. If he was too high, he would be discovered and he would be done for. He could only use his elbows to support himself on the ground, and then move his body horizontally. His toes touched the ground and his elbows moved over again. After dozens of times, his elbows, which were bearing the weight of his entire body, were completely rubbed against the bare sand and rocks, and were already dripping with blood. But Chu Yang had finally managed to move more than 100 feet horizontally, and approached a short pine forest. No matter how short the pine forest was, it was still much taller than the grass. Moreover, it was also much denser. As long as he entered this place, he would be much less of a target than Shikai's place. Chu Yang's eyes cautiously looked all around. The closer he got to success, the calmer he became. That's because there were many people who had fallen into a trap at this juncture when they relaxed. There were many examples of people who had fallen into this trap. There was a black-clothed man on top of a pine tree on his upper left. He was hiding in the dense pine branches, and his eyes were vigilantly watching every dark corner. His expression was serious and focused. He looked like a hunting dog that was hunting for food. However, he had neglected the small pine tree under his feet. Ah, it's dark under the light. It's good to be dark under the light. Chu Yang praised the professionalism of this expert of the Golden Horse Riders Department in his heart. He locked his divine sense on the opposite party, and took advantage of the opportunity when the opposite party turned his head to look in another direction. Chu Yang's body lightly floated up, and he used the last bit of his strength to hide his scarred body behind a short pine tree. Then he quickly sank down and curled up his entire body into the shadow of the short pine tree. What's the situation? The man faintly felt that there was some movement. He casually looked down at his feet but didn't find anything. So he turned his head back and muttered curses. Motherfucker, I have to catch this king of hell Chu. Motherfucker, I'm so tired. I've been squatting on this stinky bed for 3 days and 3 nights. Motherfucker, isn't this tormenting me? There are so many foxes, squirrels and hedgehogs in this mountain. Motherfucker. Obviously this man had already regarded Chu Yang as a weasel, a squirrel or something like that. Chu Yang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Of course, he wouldn't think about what kind of difficult actions this guy would take to fuck a fox, squirrel or hedgehog's grandmother. He just calmed down and rubbed the plant juice accumulated in the tribulation space little by little on his bloody wounds. Although it was very painful and wasn't conducive to the recovery of the wounds, it could make the smell of blood completely disappear from his body. Then he began to treat his injuries right under this guy's nose. He waited quietly for the sky to turn dark. When the sky turned dark, the chances of him escaping would be higher. The mountain wind was getting stronger and stronger. Occasionally, a whirlwind would blow past the trees, whistling as it blew past, bringing with it a burst of shrill cries that sounded like the cries of ghosts and the howls of gods. Then the man who was cursing would point at the sky and point at the earth. Swish 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 sounds rang out continuously. A man in black who was missing half an arm suddenly appeared here. The villagers were immediately alerted. They immediately turned their heads and asked vigilantly, "Who is it?" "It's me." "Oh, so it's Lord Throne." It was Jing Minghun who had taken the lead and arrived here. "Did you find anything?" Jing Minghun frowned and asked with a calm face. King-level expert Jing had become increasingly irritable these days. He was on the verge of exploding. "No, King of Hell Chu hasn't arrived here yet." "He hasn't arrived?" Jing Minghun frowned. "Impossible. I followed the smell of blood all the way here. It disappeared when I arrived here. How could he not have arrived?" The man in black was startled. He said, "He disappeared here?" Jing Minghun didn't answer. He sniffed and carefully looked around. Suddenly his expression tightened. He quickly walked to a certain place. Then his expression turned gloomy. There were clear traces of someone lying in this place. The distance between this place and the black-clothed man was less than 5 feet. Jing Minghun squatted down and turned over the grass. Then he wiped the grass with his finger. He raised his hand and saw that it was dark red. He put his hand to his nose and smelled it. He smelled a faint orchid fragrance. Jing Minghun's face turned ferocious. He stood up and didn't even turn his head. Instead he slapped the black-clothed man. The black-clothed man spun in a circle after being hit by this slap. His head buzzed and blood came out of his mouth and nose. He scratched his head in confusion. "King-level expert, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Jing Minghun was furious. He cursed loudly, "Fuck your grandmother. King of Hell Chu has been lying here for a long time. He even bled here. Then he rested here to restore his strength. You motherfucker, you're still dreaming." King of Hell Chu? The black-clothed man was petrified. King of Hell Chu was right under my nose? Fuck your grandmother. If it wasn't King of Hell Chu, then who else could it be? Jing Minghun was mad with anger. Jing Minghun was well aware that Chu Yang had paid a heavy price for breaking out of the encirclement. Even a 3-year-old child would have been able to kill King of Hell Chu if he had been found. However, this dear friend had missed such a good opportunity. King of Hell Chu had been lying beside him on the verge of death. He had rested for at least a quarter of an hour. But he hadn't realized it, as if he was dreaming. This guy is too slow. How stupid is he? He should have been hacked to pieces. Jing Minghun's blood rushed to his head as he looked at the place where Chu Yang had been lying on his stomach. He slapped Chu Yang's face with his remaining palm. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. His eyes were bloodshot as he trembled. You see. I'll fuck your mother. It's so obvious. There's no cover. You could have seen a person lying on his stomach. But you didn't even notice a person lying on his stomach? Your eyes are assholes. Jing Minghun felt that he had run out of words as he spoke. He didn't have enough words to describe the level of stupidity of this guy in front of him. He stared at Chu Yang as if he wanted to eat him alive. He was panting heavily. He was so angry that his mind went blank. King-level expert Jing's ferocious gaze made it seem as if he wanted to swallow him alive. The black-clothed man's body trembled. His face turned deathly pale. It's over. It's over. It's over. King of Hell Chu, you've killed me? The real King of Hell Chu was hiding on the side. He would have laughed on the spot if he hadn't been focused on healing his injuries. King-level expert Jing would have hit the jackpot if he hadn't heard Jing Menghun's angry ramblings. He would have been able to capture King of Hell Chu without breaking a sweat. What did I find? Jing Menghun's nostrils fiercely snorted. He pointed with his finger. There's a bastard here who's even more stupid than a log. It's as if I didn't find anything. Everyone was startled. They suspiciously looked at the black-clothed man. Chapter 359. Everyone whistled and scattered in all directions. Jing Menghun also left. He was burning with impatience. King of Hell Chu would have gone back if I had been a step late. Opportunity knocks but once. Everyone dispersed in an uproar. They opened their eyes wide and searched everywhere. They even turned over mouse holes to look. However, they didn't pay any attention to the short pine shrubs that were right under their noses. King of Hell Chu has been here for a long time. I'm afraid that there aren't any mice here. King of Hell Chu would have been caught by King of Hell Chu if he was here. Moreover, this place is completely flat. How can anyone hide here? More and more people saw this place. Then they whistled and scattered in all directions. Some of them even whizzed past 3 feet away from Chu Yang's hiding place. Everyone's eyes were like searchlights. Minister Chu was curled up in the shade of the pine shrubs. He was motionless. Well, you can do whatever you want. If you find him, I'll give you 50 kilograms of meat. If you don't find him, then you'll have to give me 50 kilograms of meat sooner or later. The sun was slowly setting in the west. The hot day was about to end. The people searching in the jungle were getting more and more impatient. We've been searching for so long. We've almost turned over this mountain. But there's no trace of King of Hell Chu. Has he already escaped? Absolutely not. Jing Menghun decisively concluded. King of Hell Chu's injuries are so serious. It's a miracle that he could escape to this place. It's a miracle. It's impossible for him to escape far away. Jing Menghun was well versed in medicine. He believed in his own judgment. King of Hell Chu is definitely on this mountain. Continue to pull the rope. Search every cave. Search every tree. Search every bush. Even if it's a snake hole, search every inch of it. Smash all the big rocks. I don't believe that King of Hell Chu can fly to the sky. Jing Menghun hysterically ordered. Rumbling sounds could be heard from the top to the bottom of the mountain. The big rocks on the mountain had suffered a calamity. The Golden Horse Riders Department had smashed all of them into smithereens. The Golden Horse Riders Department had smashed all of them into pieces. The wolves, insects, tigers, leopards, foxes, squirrels, rats, and even ants on the mountain were all unlucky. One by one, these homeless people fled for their lives. Occasionally, they would encounter an expert of the Golden Horse Riders Department who was in a bad mood. Chu Yang's spiritual power had also recovered with the help of the sword spirit. However, the medicinal efficacy that he had painstakingly accumulated over such a long period of time had been completely consumed, and not a single drop remained. He only cut down 2 mature Jade Snow Spirit ginseng and was not willing to use them. Now, if he were to encounter any life-threatening situation, he would rely on these 2 Jade Snow Spirit ginseng to save his life. All the medicines that Diwu Qingro and the Golden Horse Riders Department had collected over the years and obtained from the Great Zhao's Imperial Palace had turned into nothingness under the relentless pursuit of the Golden Horse Riders Department. This could also be considered as the wool coming out of the sheep's body and the other side being the sheep's. If Chu Yang hadn't stored so much medicinal efficacies, he would have died no less than 50 times in this 13,000-kilometer chase if he hadn't stored so much medicinal efficacies. Moreover, this was the time of certain death. The other minor injuries weren't taken into account either. It could be seen that the tragedy of this journey was beyond the imagination of any human being. This could explain Jing Menghun's flustered and exasperated mood. He was on the verge of committing suicide. No matter who it was, they would have been like king-level expert Jing if they had encountered an unkillable opponent. They would have jumped up and cursed angrily. The sun slowly set and the mountain slowly cooled down. The color of the sky had become somewhat dusky. The search team had become even more restless. Chu Yang hadn't moved at all. The wounds on his body were crawling with mosquitoes and ants. He could conceal the smell of blood to the greatest extent. But how could he hide it from the spirits of heaven and earth? Moreover, the grass and tree sap that he had smeared on his body was the source of these things to some extent. The pain and itch on his body were overwhelming. But Chu Yang's brows didn't wrinkle. He hadn't moved from morning to evening since he had chosen this position. This was because even the slightest movement of his eyebrows would have triggered the pine branches, and would have made a sound. The sound would have been very soft, and the possibility of being discovered was very small. But he still endured. He wouldn't allow himself to be careless even for a little bit, no matter how uncomfortable it was. Chu Yang would rather endure this kind of torture than fall into the enemy's hands if the enemy were to surround him motionlessly in the vicinity. Chu Yang would rather endure this kind of torture, which was worse than being hacked into pieces, until he was bitten to death. He would never go out and fall into the enemy's hands to seek a quick death. He would die silently. As long as they couldn't find his corpse, they would be afraid for one day. Therefore, King of Hell Chu of Iron Clouds Niao Qianqian would have been able to pretend to be King of Hell Chu. The color of the sky had finally darkened. The sound of the rope being thrown was sometimes far and sometimes near. Chu Yang secretly heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Only now did he begin to slowly use his spiritual power to vibrate his wound muscles amidst the cries of insects and cicadas all over the ground. He used his own muscles to expel the insects and ants from his wound. Many of his wounds had turned black and were festering. The sword spirit tried to use his strength to clean them up. But the results weren't great. He couldn't do anything without the power of the elixir. Even the sword spirit found it strange. How did Chu Yang persevere? Even in the sword spirit's mind, the fact that Chu Yang could endure such torture was simply a miracle in the heavenly layer. It was as black as ink. It was already the second night watch period. Chu Yang finally moved his fingers. His whole body remained in this posture. He was already numb. He moved his 10 fingers one by one until his fingers were nimble and free. Then he slowly moved his wrists, and moved them up one by one. By the time he had stretched his entire body to ensure that he could do any action without any stagnation, it was already the third day of the night watch period. Then he slid out from under the short pine tree like a boneless snake. Then he silently slid on the ground and approached the big pine village. The black-clothed man had been monitoring it from above. His muscles seemed to wrap around it in a flash. Then, like a snake, it crept up the wall without a sound. The black-clothed man had chosen this village for a reason. It was because this tree was the tallest tree within a radius of several hundred feet. Chu Yang didn't even touch any of the pine needles. He got on the big pine village's branch and continued to climb. His movements finally relaxed a little at this time. He reached the summit. Chu Yang cautiously looked around through the pine needles. He looked from near to far. Some kind of human sound was faintly heard from afar. Occasionally, a cold light would flash in a dense area of the village. It was the refraction of weapons. Chu Yang memorized it in his heart. He had to remember their location. The people who were pulling the rope had stopped at this time. They stayed motionless in the same place. They weren't made of iron. Moreover, they didn't know that it was the right time to guard the tree. As long as there was movement, it must be King of Hell Chu. Then Chu Yang slowly went down the village. He used an extremely agile movement to slowly walk inside. He didn't go outside. Instead, he chose to rush into their encirclement. There were 2 reasons for this. First, they would relax their vigilance when dawn came. They would only look outside and wouldn't look at the place where they had been watching the whole night. At that time, it would be more dangerous outside. Plus, Chu Yang's leg was injured. He couldn't use his full strength. It would be easier for them to catch up. Second, Chu Yang remembered that there used to be a medicine garden on the main peak of Beyond the Heavens sect. It belonged to the sect. Although Beyond the Heavens sect had become an empty shell, the elixirs planted inside could not be so clean. There would always be remnants. Even if it was the lowest grade of herbs. What Chu Yang needed the most now was medicinal efficacy. He urgently needed it. The current Chu Yang, even if it was poison, would give it to the sword spirit without hesitation. He would let the sword spirit find even the slightest bit of recovery efficacy from the poison. If he wanted to go to the main peak, he had to go through here. In addition to these 2 reasons, Chu Yang also had another thought in his heart. He still remembered that when he had obtained the sword point of calamity, there was the 7 shades cold energy. There was clearly a cold spring below it. Even if there were no elixirs, he could let the sword point absorb all the cold energy in the cold spring. It would be a powerful force. Now that Beyond the Heavens sect had moved away, it had become an ownerless object. Chu Yang took it without any psychological pressure. It could be said that every step he took was filled with trepidation. Every step he took, he had to check the reaction of dozens of directions. However, he didn't have much time. He had to go in before dawn. Chu Yang's eyes also became the same color as the night. Finally he went around 2, 3, he went around even more. Seeing that success was in front of his eyes, Chu Yang suddenly stopped. Then he quickly stuck his body to the trunk of a big pine tree, noiselessly. The moment he hid, a few people quietly walked out from the corner. They brushed against the pine tree that Chu Yang was hiding in. Their eyes were bright as they walked forward. Chu Yang closed his eyes and counted their steps. After 3 breaths he quickly turned around. His body flashed and he had already entered the center of the encirclement. His back was already covered in cold sweat. In the center of the encirclement, danger lurked everywhere. Chu Yang tried hard to hold his breath. He moved like a snake for a while, lay dormant for a while, and then moved like a snake for a while. Looking at the situation here, Chu Yang was even less confident. The mountain rocks in this area were all shattered. Even the turf in some places had been shoveled up by some unknown method. There were very few places that could block a person's body. Chapter 360. Chu Yang's body had almost fallen apart by the time he had finally laid down under the grass. However, Chu Yang was comforted by the smooth journey. This place was the closest place to the mountain. Jing Minghun would continue to search as soon as the sky brightened. So, Chu Yang would immediately get up and set foot on the path to the main peak as soon as they started to search the area. This was his only chance. The path to the main peak might be more difficult to traverse. However, Chu Yang would have to replenish his medicinal efficacies if he wanted to get out alive. The sky brightened up after he had hidden for less than half an hour. Jing Minghun's voice resounded, "Have you found anything?" The people of the Golden Horse Riders Department were scattered around. Therefore, Jing Minghun's voice was very loud and reverberated in all directions. "No. I also haven't found anything here. I haven't found anything." Jing Minghun's complexion turned ugly. He shook his hand and released an invisible fly. The sound of flapping wings resounded after a while. That invisible mound had flown back. Jing Minghun held it in his hand and looked at the message it had brought. His face exposed a look of relief as he said, "We haven't found anything at the intersection over there. King of Hell Chu is still in this mountain." "Yes. If we still can't find him today." Jing Minghun's expression changed. He clenched his teeth and looked up at Feng Se. Then he said bitterly, "We can only set fire to the mountain." Set fire to the mountain. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were somewhat hesitant. This was a big taboo in the Chongtian continent. Setting fire to the mountain was very likely to destroy hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of people's livelihood. People would say that it was like killing a person with 1,000 knives. Could it be that king-level expert Jing has committed such a crime? This is Iron Cloud. The people here are our enemies. Jing Minghun said in a heavy tone, "Moreover, we are trying to capture King of Hell. Moreover, we might be able to capture him today. So we don't need to set fire to the mountain." Everyone was speechless. "Let's start. Move quickly. Call out immediately if you find anything unusual." Jing Minghun waved his hand and took the lead to leave. Everyone else also flew up and scattered in all directions. At this juncture, Chu Yang leaped into the air, seemingly following the scattering crowd as he headed in the direction of his search. Someone noticed him, but his timing was too good. Furthermore, he was brazen, as if he was one of their own. Furthermore, they only saw a blurry back view and didn't think much of it. At this juncture, almost no one suspected anything. Everyone went about their own business. They had let the real King of Hell Chu, the biggest target of this operation, slip away from under their noses. Good heavens! It was truly a blessing from the heavens. Chu Yang took a deep breath and spurred his horse to rush up. "Really, you were so good to me when you were alive. I feel extremely guilty and remorseful that I have to go against you in this life." While his thoughts were running wild, he turned around and was already several feet away. Then he flew forward and stayed close to the ground for several tens of feet. After turning a corner, he was far away from the sight of that group of people. Only then did he slow down his speed. He had no choice but to slow down. The cut on his thigh was so deep that the bone could be seen. This movement caused a heart-wrenching pain. There were signs of blood oozing out again. "I am so fucking miserable." Chu Yang touched his thigh. His footsteps were slow, but he didn't stop. He vigilantly observed his surroundings as he quickly walked up the main peak. He didn't take the main road. Instead, he took a secluded path. This path was filled with lush vegetation. Ordinary people wouldn't know that there was a path here. Only a native, like Chu Yang, would know the route of this path. After a while, Chu Yang entered the main peak and approached the location of the elixir garden. The sword point jumped excitedly. There are still some leftovers. Chu Yang was overjoyed. He tiptoed over, but I don't know how much is left for me. Motherfucker, even an ant's leg is meat. No matter how much there is, I will gladly accept it. However, when he arrived at the elixir garden, surrounded by large trees, his face turned bitter. Wu Yunliang was worthy of being called the sect master of this generation. This elixir garden was also very clean. There were only a few ordinary herbs in the surroundings. It would have been better if I didn't. I took such a big risk. Chu Yang sighed. He carefully approached and let the sword point absorb the medicinal power. When he was about to leave, the sword point was still trembling. He couldn't help but be startled. Following the direction of the sword tip, his eyes lit up. So that's how it is. Everything above and below the ground that can be taken away has been taken away, but there are always some roots that are deeply rooted. Due to the haste in which they were taken away, many roots were left behind. Under the guidance of the sword point, Chu Yang collected the rhizomes of 7 or 8 elixirs in one go. Although there weren't many of them, only a section of each kind, he had finally accumulated some medicinal efficacies. Even the sword spirit in Chu Yang's mind kept saying that it was a great help. Now it could finally heal its wounds. It had completely forgotten that this little bit of medicinal power was a pitiful little bit that it would have disdained to even look at in the past. During this process, the experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department had searched this place several times. But Chu Yang's spirit fire had evaded them every time. Then Chu Yang sneaked into the main hall. This place had already been burned into ruins after the previous incident. The experts of the Golden Horse Riders Department had clumsily searched for this place. So they simply smashed every stone in this place. Therefore, it could be said that this place was a real white ground with potholes. But this obviously wasn't a problem for Chu Yang, who was very familiar with this place. He chose a place and carefully removed the soil from the top with slight movements. Chu Yang smiled when he saw the flagstones and big stones below. For an ordinary person, this was as difficult as ascending to heaven. But for Chu Yang, it provided him with a place to hide. Chu Yang lifted a slab of stone and then jumped in. The flagstone fell down and gently stirred up a cloud of dust. But Chu Yang had already disappeared without a trace. This time he was truly safe. Unless the Golden Horse Riders Department turned the entire mountain upside down, they wouldn't be able to find Chu Yang as long as he didn't come out. Chu Yang was like a burrowing mouse. His speed was extremely fast. It didn't take much effort for him to find the secret passage that led directly to his residence. Then he followed the increasingly strong cold air. He went all the way through the 7 green jade doors. He finally smiled when he reached the innermost place. This place was still the same as when he had left. But the stones that he had dug out had been put back in by him. Now they had been frozen under the strong cold air. But this naturally wasn't a problem for Chu Yang. He unsheathed his sword, and instantly condensed the cold air that he had absorbed from the 7 Shades congregation ground. Then he stabbed it down like lightning. It was like a sharp knife cutting into tofu. He stabbed it until the end. What kind of treasure does this 7 Shades congregation ground have? Chu Yang muttered. With a lift of his hand, a squarish rock was pulled out. His hands didn't stop. He dug out a big hole in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang looked at the small place where the sword point had been lying. There was still a clear shape of the sword point on it. Chu Yang took a deep breath. He didn't hesitate any longer. He drew a circle with his sword and suddenly stabbed it down. He shook his wrist and a big square stone jumped up. Chu Yang suddenly felt that there was something different this time. He looked at it and couldn't help but be startled. The sword point was pierced through a strange solid that wasn't gold, jade, or stone. It wasn't a simple stone. Bring it in, the sword spirit said with concern. The voice was actually very anxious. You're so young, but you actually found a strange treasure this time. It's all thanks to you. It's been so long, but you still can't forget it. Chu Yang smiled and said directly, What is this? This is mysterious jade crystal. The sword spirit said, Go down another 150 feet. No matter what you dig out, put it all into the tribulation space. Little if you're lucky. This time you'll get one of the top rare medicines in the heavenly realm. Rare medicine? Chu Yang's whole body trembled. Suddenly, his face flushed red, and his pupils dilated. He asked suddenly, Really? Doesn't that mean that the heavy pill is about to take shape? That's right. The sword spirit was also a little excited. When I came here last time, my spirit was too weak. I didn't even realize that such a top rare treasure existed in such a barren place. This might be the mysterious ice jade ointment. Mysterious ice jade paste? What is it? Chu Yang asked as he continued to dig. The mysterious jade crystals in the tribulation space had already piled up like a mountain. He was extremely excited. Jianghu, your injury is finally going to be healed. I'm about to get the heavy pill. Jianghu, wait for me. I'll go to the heavenly realm as soon as this battle is over. I've finally changed your fate for you. Jianghu, I've done it. You don't know about mysterious ice jade paste? The sword spirit said angrily. Then do you know what rare medicines are? I don't know. Chu Yang shook his head honestly. The sword spirit sighed deeply. The so-called great miracle medicine is, in fact, a great heavenly treasure. But you have to remember that this heavenly treasure, whether it exists in the shape of a ginseng or a ganoderma, or in the shape of a stream of water, or even in the shape of a flame. But at the end of the day, this heavenly treasure is made of jade. The spiritual jade of the heavens and earth suddenly combines with some kind of elixir at a magical moment. It absorbs the spiritual energy of the heavens and earth and the essence of the sun and moon, turning something rotten into something magical. Therefore, this rare medicine can be used to treat any injury and any medicine. Other elixirs, even those with greater efficacy, can't be used because of this spiritual jade of the heavens and earth. 1. The spiritual jade ginseng in Diwu Qingrou's hand is one of them. It has the shape of a ginseng. 1. The mysterious ice jade paste has been around for a long time. It will form a rare mysterious jade crystal. The pursuit is coming to an end. When you see this, you should understand why I set up such a paragraph. Everything has its meaning. Many people don't understand and are impatient with being hunted down. But I want to say this, being hunted down for thousands of miles is definitely not for the sake of making things easier. It has a deep meaning. I can proudly say that it's a battle of wits that other books don't have. In order to set up such a section, I need to lay the groundwork in advance. I need to be cautious and conscientious at all times. To be blunt, I need to rack my brains. Chapter 361. The Sword Spirit said slowly, this situation is unique to the heaven-level continent. Tens of thousands of years ago, people called it heaven-level jade. Later they felt that it was a bit awkward, so they reversed the order and called it heaven-level jade. Do you understand? I see, Chu Yang said thoughtfully. Suddenly, a thought arose in his mind. Heaven-level continent, calamity sword, heaven-level jade. Is there a connection? You guessed right. Heaven-level jade is actually a kind of spiritual jade used by the calamity sword when the Almighty created the heaven-level continent. In fact, it is related to the calamity sword. But since then, none of the masters of the calamity sword have managed to collect this miraculous medicine. So, even I don't know what it looks like or what it can do. The sword spirit's voice was very low. Now, do you understand? I understand. Wow, what is this thing? It can move. Chu Yang exclaimed. His eyes widened as he looked at the bottom of the pit. At the bottom of the pit, there was a small piece of milky white flowing water, but it was very viscous. It also emitted a sparkling light, as if countless stars were hidden in it. It was the size of a palm and seemed to have removed the weight on its body. As if it had just woken up from a dream, it was slowly wriggling. For a moment, it was long, round, and polygonal. As it wriggled, waves of wondrous aroma were emitted from it. Moreover, the temperature underground had already reached the point where it could almost freeze a living person to death. Now the temperature was dropping rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the stones next to it were so cold that they made cracking sounds, as if they were about to be frozen and cracked. Quickly take it in. The sword spirit shouted in a hurried tone. Chu Yang hurriedly did as he was told. His mind moved and a schwa sound was heard. With a thought, the small piece of strange thing entered the space. This is the mysterious ice jade paste? Chu Yang curiously observed this strange thing in the space of consciousness. Yes. The sword spirit seemed to be relieved. He said excitedly, this is the mysterious ice jade paste that has never appeared in the world for thousands of years. No one has ever found it before. Chu Yang said, oh. The sword spirit appeared to be very excited. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, this is a good thing to decide. Good stuff is good stuff. What are you yelling for? Chu Yang muttered, those who don't know would think that I did something to you. What do you know? This thing is good for my soul. The sword spirit said excitedly, it has only been in the tribulation space for a short while, but I already feel a lot more excited. Chu Yang snorted. Then, the mysterious ice jade paste in the tribulation space suddenly divided into 3 pieces, 2 small pieces and 1 large piece. The sword spirit had already moved the big piece to the vitality spring. It only bubbled at the mouth of the spring before it disappeared without a trace. Let the sword tip eat this smaller one. You eat the smallest one, sword spirit happily said. After that, I will extract it from your meridians and turn it into pure medicinal efficacies. This is great. Haha, I don't have to worry about the lack of medicinal strength anymore. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. I'll eat it, and then you take it out? Motherfucker, why do I feel that it's not very useful? It seems that you're only using my body as a transit station? However, the sword point had already excitedly pounced on it. With a squeak, that fingernail-sized piece of mysterious ice jade paste. Relatively speaking, the larger piece had already disappeared. Then the sword tip began to jump around in excitement. Chu Yang finally understood the meaning of the phrase, let the sword tip eat it. Originally, the sword tip would recover the medicinal strength of any elixir as long as it ate it. But this time it was a one-way trip. This made Minister Chu, who was waiting to receive the medicinal strength, a little depressed. However, he was comforted by the fact that there were 3 soybean-sized things on the hilt of the tribulation sword in his dantian. The heavy elixir is formed. And 3 of them at once. Chu Yang waited for a long time without any results. So, he picked up the small one and looked at it curiously for a while. Then he sent it over. It's too small. It's at most the size of a corn grain. Idiot, if it's any bigger you'll explode in an instant even if I extract the medicinal strength. Do you think this is Diwu Qing Ro's useless mysterious ice jade ginseng? This is a 10,000-year mysterious ice jade paste. Diwu Qing Rose is at most 1,000 years old. And this is just an empty number. The sword spirit mercilessly reprimanded the greedy owner of the tribulation sword. Chu Yang was about to speak when he suddenly felt an ice-cold stream of air rising from Du Fu's body. In an instant, his mouth was filled with a lingering fragrance. That kind of rich fragrance seemed to make even his soul cheer at this moment. Every hair on his body seemed to be dancing. Then, an abundant and irresistible power fiercely rushed up from his dantian, and rushed into the meridians of his entire body. In an instant, the meridians of his entire body were cleansed, and this power became stronger and stronger. Finally, it rushed up to the imperial canopy, broke through the jade pillow, and transformed into a turbulent waterfall that flowed down to the back of his head. Then it rushed up to the soles of his feet and once again rushed up, it passed through his dantian, and another powerful medicinal power was added, this cycle repeated 3 times. Chu Yang felt that his whole body was bulging like a balloon. It seemed that he was about to explode. Fuck, why aren't you helping me? Minister Chu was scared to death. How can such a small amount of mysterious ice jade paste have such a strong force? Do you know how powerful it is? You think it's too little? You'll explode. The sword spirit muttered in a gloating manner. Then he began to extract the remaining medicinal efficacies from his meridians. A shadow suddenly emerged from Chu Yang's heart. It turned into the shape of a palm. Then, it suddenly broke through the surface of his body and turned into a pure white orchid. It stayed for a moment. Then, it turned into an elegant and clear air and suddenly dissipated. A burst of orchid fragrance suddenly filled the entire stone room. Diwu Qing Ro's destroying soul and breaking heart palm has finally removed the root cause. Seeing such a strange scene, Chu Yang understood even if the sword spirit didn't say it. But he also realized the tyranny and power of this soul and breaking heart palm. If the sword spirit hadn't been there, perhaps even his bones would have turned into ashes. He couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. He was scared of his adventure that night. There was such a martial art in the world. Diwu Qing Ro had such an earth-shattering method. Even the sword spirit of the Calamity Sword was able to leave such a mark after such a long time. It had been said that he had almost recovered. No wonder it's called 10,000 miles fragrance. It seems that it's more than 10,000 miles. With such a palm technique, it would be able to follow him for an entire lifetime. The sword spirit was in the middle of absorbing the energy. But it suddenly stopped. And all the pores on Chu Yang's skin suddenly erupted at the same time. Waves of fishy smelly things sprayed out in the form of fine strands as thin as hair. Chu Yang was caught off guard by the huge pain. His vision suddenly turned black and he almost fainted. He clenched his teeth, and his face convulsed as he sucked in cold air. Then the sword spirit continued to suck. He asked while sucking, "Is it good? I'm really holding it so good." Chu Yang wanted to groan. But he found that the pain was gone. Moreover, his whole body felt very good. All the impurities in your body have been expelled. The sword spirit snorted and said, now your body is the heavenly level man's dream. Xiantian body. Xiantian body? Damn. Chu Yang was pleasantly surprised. Are you satisfied? If it weren't for the mysterious ice jade ointment, you would have reached the sword emperor grade. Moreover, it wouldn't have been that pure. The sword spirit said. It's good. It's very good. Chu Yang looked at his body contentedly. Only then did he realize that he was naked now. His clothes had already turned gray at some point in time. There was a piece of broken ice under his feet. You don't need to look. Those are your clothes. They've been frozen to pieces, the sword spirit said. Chu Yang was speechless. He shrugged his shoulders. Then he laughed and said, how is it? Is it big? What do you mean big? The sword spirit was somewhat puzzled. I'm talking about this. Minister Chu spread his legs and shook them. Suddenly, he shook his head and swayed his head. Ugh. The sword spirit was speechless. Black lines appeared on his forehead. Then Chu Yang felt that his body was wrinkled. He stretched out his hand and countless scars fell down like powder. He looked at his thigh. That hideous scar had already healed. His body was even smoother and whiter than a newborn baby. You've also grown taller. The sword spirit reminded him. I know. Chu Yang was overjoyed. He looked at his arms and legs. He was almost drooling. They're so tender. Tender my ass. The sword spirit said mercilessly, wait until you go out. You'll only need one battle. Then your body will turn into a broken sack. Hey, I've eaten such a heavenly treasure. My martial power should have increased greatly, right? Chu Yang asked complacently, what level am I at now? It's already very good. Now you're at the peak of revered sword grade. The sword spirit said, wait until you go out. You should be able to break through to king grade. So little? Chu Yang was somewhat dissatisfied. Heavenly treasure isn't for increasing your martial power. The sword spirit said angrily, you've been promoted by 2 levels. Moreover, your body has been transformed into a Xiantian body. All the scars on your body have been healed. Moreover, you've expelled the heartbreaking palm. What else do you want? Do you want to become a supreme level expert in one step? Let me tell you something. You can't do it even if you gather all the great elixirs. Chu Yang realized that he had received enough benefits. He laughed hollowly, I'm just saying. Then he changed his mind and said angrily, why are you so fierce? Chapter 362. When Diwu Qingro was about to reach Jiang Yi's 4,000 li mark, he unexpectedly laughed when he received an emergency report. Bai Changtian's 500,000 soldiers will be wiped out. This sentence made the faces of all the generals who were on the expedition change. But Diwu Qingro actually laughed? Hurry up. Diwu Qingro insipidly said. Then he closed his eyes and reclined on the carriage. No one dared to say anything when he closed his eyes to rest. However, they all felt that it was strange. How could he not care about such a big loss? Diwu Qingro's mind was churning rapidly with his eyes closed. He recalled his plan once again. Then he nodded with satisfaction. It seems that King of Hell Chu is an important person of Iron Cloud. Tai Butian thinks highly of him, Diwu Qingro sighed. Love means? This time Han Buchu was accompanying Jun on this expedition. He had not gone far when Diwu Qingro called him to his carriage. Haha. Diwu Qingro laughed in a relaxed manner. He slowly said, we should be sure of success this time. Han Buchu was even more confused. But he knew that Bai Changtian was the only one who had survived the great Zhao dynasty's imperial court and was determined to protect the emperor. Han Buchu couldn't bear to throw away 500,000 soldiers. But he still felt relieved for Diwu Qingro. But, is there any other meaning to this? I don't know. Immediately send a message to inform Jing Menghan. If King of Hell Chu has the ability to escape 11,000 miles away, tell him to do whatever it takes. Sir. Even set fire to the mountains? Diwu Qingro closed his eyes and said softly. Yes, Han Buchu complied. But he was still confused. This plan may succeed but it may fail halfway. Therefore I didn't say anything. I didn't make any clear arrangements. I can only take one step at a time. The war will continue as usual if this plan doesn't succeed. But this war may end half a year ahead of schedule if it succeeds. Or, it may end directly. It seems that this plan has already succeeded halfway. The fifth smiled softly, and the sunlight that came through the curtain of the carriage cast a mottled shadow on his face. Jianghu. Han Buchu didn't think he was a stubborn person, but he didn't know what Diwu Qingro was talking about. Buchu, you're still lacking some control over the big guns. Diwu Qingro half closed his eyes and said, do you still remember the arrangement I made when I was arranging the formation? Yes, Zhuji doesn't dare to forget it. So, you must remember that King of Helchu had issued a new order when he had escaped from the province? So that Lu Dejun's route was slightly adjusted? Diwu Qingro asked. I remember. Since you remember, do you know why? Diwu Qingro asked with a smile. This. Han Buchu racked his brain to think, but he could not think of anything. He could only laugh bitterly. This humble one is ashamed. It's not that you couldn't think of it, but that you didn't realize it. It's no wonder. Diwu Qingro smiled. Han Buchu realized that Diwu Qingro was smiling a lot today. Would you please enlighten me? There's an important person in this Jirong, and that person is King of Helchu. Diwu Qingro said softly, the success or failure of this plan depends on King of Helchu. If King of Helchu can't escape, then this plan won't succeed. If King of Helchu's weight in Tai Butian's heart isn't heavy, then this plan won't succeed. King of Helchu? Han Buchu frowned. What does this matter have to do with King of Helchu? What ability does King of Helchu have to affect the course of the war? You're wrong. Diwu Qingro smiled, but his voice had become somewhat heavy. King of Helchu has already affected the course of the war. Moreover, he has started from the root. It seems that I, Diwu Qingro, have taken the initiative in this war, but in fact I have no other choice. Or rather, it should be said that King of Helchu has started this war single-handedly. Han Buchu sucked in a breath of cold air. King of Helchu has started this war single-handedly? A war between the two sides? The current situation of the war is somewhat similar to the war between me and Tai Longqing 10 years ago. Whatever I want him to do, he can only do it according to my wishes even though he feels aggrieved. That's because it involves the power of the entire Iron Cloud. Diwu Qingro sighed and said, it's a pity. The one who has taken the lead right now is King of Helchu. And the one who has to follow the others' wishes is me, Diwu Qingro. This is the greatest humiliation of my life's battles. Han Buchu was shocked to the point of being speechless. King of Helchu was very powerful and his wisdom was superb. Han Buchu had to admit this. He had also listed King of Helchu as the most dangerous person in Diwu Qingro's life's greatest enemy. However, he had never thought that King of Helchu could make Diwu Qingro so afraid. Moreover, he had suffered such a loss. He had suffered such an aggrieved loss. It's also fate. Diwu Qingro's eyes were somewhat blurred as he looked at the shadow on the carriage's curtain. He sighed and said, the times create heroes. King of Helchu is a genius born from the world situation that I, Diwu Qingro, have created. But because of him, I have fallen into a passive position. This can be considered as drinking and pecking. Diwu Qingro spoke softly on the long road, but his words were endless. It could be seen that Diwu Qingro had been holding back for a long time. Now it was finally time for him to pour his heart out. Even though there was only one audience, you should remember the plan that I formulated for Iron Cloud. Iron Cloud wanted King of Helchu. However, the plan was to be completed 3 years later. Because of King of Helchu's arrival, this plan was brought forward by 3 years. King of Helchu appeared in Iron Cloud and began to deal with us. Step by step he dug out our spies in Iron Cloud. If that was the case, I could endure it. My martial brother was captured by him. I was heartbroken and in pain, but I could still endure it. Next, he set up a trap in Iron Cloud to deal with our Golden Horse Riders department. 1 king-level master was alive, and 1 king-level master was disabled. Nearly 100 revered martial artists and above died in Iron Cloud. This weakened Golden Horse Riders department by 1/3. I could still endure this. But because I could endure it, King of Helchu had no choice but to travel thousands of miles to the prefectures. His purpose in coming to the prefectures was not to rush me into war, but to delay our preparations for war. But he did one thing wrong. He left us with no room to maneuver. Or rather, we can't blame him for this. He did not expect this, and it was not something that he could control. I can only say that the heavens caught us. Diwu Qingro looked up to the sky and sighed. In this situation, I was forced into a passive position. I did not expect this. King of Helchu took the initiative, but it was too late for regrets. This was beyond my expectations. I can only say that the war was brought forward. I am helpless. King of Helchu is even more helpless and speechless. Han Buchu had not spoken since Diwu Qingro started talking. He had been quietly listening. He knew that Diwu Qingro did not need him to give an opinion. He only needed him to be a listener. Of course, he would talk about his strategies and plans so that Han Buchu would know. Therefore, King of Helchu began to cause havoc. He turned the world upside down. According to the situation at that time, he could have delayed the war for a year or two. But he should not have led the war for treasures to the imperial palace. Moreover, he destroyed the imperial palace. The muscles on Diwu Qingro's face twitched as he said, "Then the royal palace was destroyed and the royal treasury was stolen." It was at this time that everyone was anxious and overwrought, that a nobody changed history. Diwu Qingro sighed heavily at this point. He really could not bear the feeling of wanting to curse that inner palace chief steward, Huanyi or Feng Feng. He faked an imperial edict and asked me what to do. At that point, if I took a step back, the entire 5th chapter would have been destroyed. So I could only go in. But once I went in, I had to face the imperial spring. There was no turning back. But I still had to go in. Therefore the imperial spring was destroyed by me. Hearing this, Han Buchu smiled bitterly. At this point, the imperial spring was destroyed. We cannot go without an emperor. If we support a new emperor to the throne, then for 8 to 10 years, there will be no talk of becoming an immortal. Han Buchu sighed. His heart was filled with sorrow at these words. A new emperor brings a new emperor. This was a fixed number. If that was the case, the mobilization of the entire army for the northern expedition would have been impossible. At this time, we must let the imperial spring have something to do. Moreover, the internal situation was like this. On Iron Cloud's side, there were fewer and fewer spies. Now there were no spies with enough power. Some time ago, Anja's spies and Iron Cloud's military had also gone silent. The situation was dire. Moreover, Iron Cloud's relationship with the wolves is getting better and better. They have the intention to cut us off. A few large horse farms and industrial industries have also suffered different degrees of destruction. This shows that Iron Cloud has passed the internal crisis and is beginning to deal with us. If we give Iron Cloud 3 more years, I am afraid they will really develop. At that time we will have a big problem. Diwu Qingro sighed. Therefore, with internal and external troubles, now is the best time for us to go to war with Iron Cloud. Iron Cloud's strength is at its weakest. You tell me? King of Helchu, there are so many things. Which one of them doesn't have King of Helchu's shadow in it? Diwu Qingro sighed. King of Helchu is a rare genius. His original intention was to maintain the status quo and delay the war as much as possible. I, Diwu Qingro, am not unduly humble. At the very least, I can be considered a wise man. But the two of us have the same goal. Moreover, we are enemies. But the two of us did not want the war to start now. But the two of us worked together to promote the war. Chapter 363. Han Buchu heaved a deep sigh. This matter isn't just a joke. It's a big joke that involves 2 bai and clans and 2 billion people. It was just that this joke hinted at too much of a fishy situation. Han Buchu sighed. Then he put Diwu Qingro's words together. He was horrified to find that Diwu Qingro hadn't gone out of his own free will. In fact, he had been forced out by King of Helchu. King of Helchu didn't want to force Diwu Qingro. But Diwu Qingro should be proud of his impressive achievements. King of Helchu has always been scheming. But he has pushed the 2 Baiyan clans to a dead end. Since this battle was started by him, how can he not pay a price? Diwu Qingro smiled. Han Buchu vaguely understood. Sir, are you talking about the matter of chasing King of Helchu for thousands of miles? Yes. Diwu Qingro nodded approvingly. King of Helchu has been hit by my destroying soul and breaking heart palm. But he's still able to escape thousands of miles in one day. This is a very frightening situation. I feel that he's likely to escape this time. Therefore, I didn't relax my pursuit of King of Helchu. But I was also preparing for the eventuality that King of Helchu could escape. That's why I immediately gave the order for the reinforcements to change their direction. At the very least, they have to deviate from their original route by 800 miles. On the surface, it seems that their ultimate goal is to go to the main battlefield. But I only need to give the order if there's a change in the situation. And those 3 armies can immediately attack the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Of course, there's a precondition for this. And that is, the general of the heaven-splitting mountain pass must come out to fight. Diwu Qingro slowly said. Therefore I arranged for 500,000 by and soldiers to go. Han Buchu sucked in a cold breath. I didn't intend to let Bai Chang Tian and his 500,000 by and soldiers go back. It is the same here and on the main battlefield. Diwu Qingro didn't conceal his thoughts in front of Han Buchu. He said in a heavy voice, but these 500,000 demonic beasts aren't enough. They aren't enough to make the heaven-splitting mountain pass break. If you want to achieve this goal, you have to establish a prerequisite, King of Hell Chu's importance in Tai Butian's heart. The weight of King of Hell Chu in Tai Butian's heart. Han Buchu's heart shook. Today Diwu Qingro had said this sentence twice. Moreover, he had not changed a single word. Why was this so? Rumor has it that Tai Butian has already gone on an expedition, and is currently in the middle of the month. Diwu Qingro said indifferently. Han Buchu really wanted to ask, so what? But he didn't dare to ask. For Tai Butian to lead the army on an expedition, the boost to the morale of the soldiers is incomparable. But there was also one great disadvantage. Tai Butian was in a very dangerous place. Moreover, it would be obvious that her heart would be the most vulnerable to my attack. Therefore, Tai Butian's safety had become Tai Longcheng's biggest headache and worry. Tai Longcheng wanted to ensure Tai Butian's safety under such circumstances. Moreover, the morale of the army couldn't be slack. So, the best thing to do was to send Tai Butian to another front line. And that was the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Tai Butian would be absolutely safe there. With the heaven-splitting mountain pass there, my army wouldn't be able to break through the pass even if it were 10 million soldiers. So, I wouldn't be able to catch Tai Butian. Diwu Qingro spoke with a strong sense of self-confidence. Yes, Han Buchu agreed. Therefore, I concluded that Tai Butian, the Iron Cloud Monarch, is already in the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Diwu Qingro narrowed his eyes and a sharp cold light flashed in them. Diwu Qingro had only miscalculated one thing. Tai Butian hadn't gone to the heaven-splitting mountain pass because Tai Longcheng had sent him there. However, such initiative and passivity had no effect on Diwu Qingro's Ji-Rong. All roads lead to the same destination. Han Buchu would have had to knock his head against the wall if he still hadn't understood by now. He smiled and said, King of Hell Chu is important enough in Tai Butian's heart. Then Tai Butian would have come to his rescue as long as he knew that King of Hell Chu had escaped to the vicinity of the heaven-splitting mountain pass. Yes, Diwu Qingro nodded. But Tai Butian can't act on impulse. He must have a good reason to come to King of Hell Chu's rescue. Han Buchu said, therefore the Prime Minister had sent Bai Chang Tian to deliver Tai Butian. And that was to give Tai Butian a good reason to come to King of Hell Chu. Moreover, Tai Butian would have advanced again after this great victory. But no one would have said anything about him since he had such a glorious victory. Moreover, our army isn't in the vicinity. Yes, Diwu Qingro smiled. Therefore, the Prime Minister had sent a letter to King-level expert Jing to burn down the mountain if necessary. In fact, it wasn't just to burn down King of Hell Chu. It was also to inform Tai Butian that the Golden Horse Riders Department's pursuit of King of Hell Chu has arrived here. Tai Butian continued. Yes. Tai Butian would have led the others to help him in order to save King of Hell Chu. But King of Hell Chu is still in Iron Cloud at the moment. So, Tai Butian can't make a move before the situation is settled. Therefore he has no choice but to come himself. Han Buchu was so shocked that he opened his mouth wide. So, the Prime Minister's plan is here. Tai Butian would have come to rescue King of Hell Chu. And our three teams could have changed their direction at any time. They could have attacked him head-on. Or they could have cut off Tai Butian's escape route. Or they could have pursued him from behind. And they could have seized the heaven-splitting mountain pass in one fell swoop. And King-level leader Jing and the others would have been there at that time. And they would have gathered all their experts to chase King of Hell Chu. Perhaps they would have been able to kill Tai Butian in one fell swoop. In that case, the situation would have been settled in one day. Han Buchu was really shocked. Diwu Qingro had actually laid such a big trap. Yes, that's why I've ordered the three teams to get close to that place. They must be within 1,500 kilometers. Tai Butian would have been alerted if they got close. But they wouldn't have been able to catch up if they got too far, Diwu Qingro said. However, 1,500 li is still quite far. It would have taken 3 days for the teams to travel on foot. Wouldn't it be too far? Han Buchu asked worriedly. Not far. Jing Minghun would have tried his best to stop King of Hell Chu. And Tai Butian would have had to wait or look for King of Hell Chu's whereabouts. This entire process would have taken at least one night. And once such a situation occurs, only the cavalry would have been able to move for the entire night. The army would have followed closely behind. The elite cavalry would have been able to cover 800 kilometers in one night. Tai Butian's side would have been able to find the person or the body. Then they would have had to retreat. And this would have taken time. The army wouldn't have been able to catch up with them. So, it would have been impossible for everyone to rush back at once. 4 to 6 hours wouldn't have been enough. Jing Minghun's experts would have been able to delay Tai Butian's army by 6 hours if they hadn't been able to kill Tai Butian. And that would have been more than enough. And our cavalry would have been able to get within 300 kilometers during this time. What we're fighting for is the time within these 300 kilometers. Diwu Qingro tapped his finger on the table. And the generals of these three teams are the Gold, Silver, and Jade Tiger generals. I've specially selected these people. Han Buchu immediately understood. Gold Tiger General Jin Nangkai, Silver Tiger General Long Ao, and Jade Tiger General Yu Qinglong. These three people were relatively young. The oldest one wasn't more than 40 years old. And they were all cavalry experts. They were especially good at leading the enemy into battle. They dared to take risks. These three people were the kind of people who would have risked their lives to see such an opportunity. Diwu Qingro had specially selected these three people to lead these three teams. And this was because he had seen their drive. Diwu Qingro would have never used these experienced and prudent generals in this kind of operation. After all, this was a blitzkrieg. And this opportunity might have been lost in the blink of an eye. And which of these experienced and prudent generals didn't plan before making a move? But if you plan before making a move, then you won't be able to catch up with the real opportunity. It was absolutely necessary to be impulsive. An ordinary general wouldn't have been able to get within 300 kilometers. And they wouldn't have been able to fight for time. But these three people would have been willing to risk their lives to seize this opportunity. Diwu Qingro had thought this through thoroughly. It was just an assumption and a conjecture. But he had taken every conceivable possibility into account. And he had decided on a brilliant plan for Iron Cloud. If they didn't seize this opportunity, then Iron Cloud might really lose this war. Another piece of invisible information flew over while they were talking. Diwu Qingro took a look at it. Then he smiled and handed it over to Han Buchu. Han Buchu took a look at it. Then he couldn't help but smack his forehead. What a brilliant plan. Sure enough. The information said, after the Iron Cloud army invaded my 500,000 soldiers, they advanced 100 kilometers along the slanting valley. They're currently outside the slanting valley. They're close to the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect. Diwu Qingro chuckled and said, the key lies in the word slanting valley. The terrain here is narrow and difficult to traverse. The soldiers must be in good order to pass through. Once they're chased or attacked, they'll be squeezed together. It'll be difficult for them to move even an inch. The enemy doesn't even need to expend much effort to break the morale of the entire team. Diwu Qingro's brows twitched. He said sinisterly, Tai Butian, I sent 500,000 soldiers into the slanting valley for you to defeat. You should be satisfied, right? However, I, Diwu Qingro, am not so easy to take advantage of. Even if I purposely sent them out to be attacked by your army, it's still the same. You defeated my army head-on. Then I'll chase after you and kill you, the leader of Iron Cloud. The sky had already darkened. Tai Butian was taking a nap in the commander's tent. Suddenly there was a commotion outside. Someone shouted, fire, fire. Then a soldier came to reporting to the emperor. The entire mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect suddenly burst into flames. The mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect? Burst into flames? Tai Butian's heart skipped a beat as he sat up straight. His eyes shone with a dazzling light. Yes. Earlier only the main peak was on fire. Thick smoke rose everywhere. But, with the wind, the entire mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect has turned into a sea of fire. Moreover, the fire is spreading to the surroundings. The scout replied respectfully. I understand. Tai Butian felt his heart beating wildly. All the fluids in his body rushed to his head. He even felt a little dizzy. Why did Beyond the Heavens sect suddenly burst into flames? There was no doubt that someone had set it on fire. But why? Tai Butian's body even trembled slightly. Chu Yang had returned. This fire must have been set by the Golden Horse Riders department. They had chased after Chu Yang until here. They had lost track of Chu Yang. But they weren't willing to let Chu Yang escape. So they set the mountain on fire. They wanted to burn Chuyang inside. Even if they couldn't burn Chuyang, they could still drag him out. No one could survive in a burning mountain. Chapter 364. I'm here. Wu Kuangyun jumped out with a puff while covering his buttocks. The last time he was beaten, he still felt a dull pain. He was lying in ambush at His Majesty's side to prevent the Emperor from coming up with a new battle plan. Organize the troops and set off immediately. Let's go to the place where the fire is burning the mountain. Tai Butian made a prompt decision and hastily ordered. This won't do, Your Majesty. Wu Kuangyun was startled. Then he shouted as if his buttocks were on fire, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. He followed closely behind Tai Butian. His buttocks were sticking out. He was so anxious that his hairy face was dripping with sweat. Your Majesty, please reconsider, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please wait. Your Majesty, you can't do this. What? Tai Butian angrily turned around and glared at him. Your Majesty, it's already very difficult to stay here. The slanting valley is too narrow. In case the enemy attacks, we won't be able to retreat in time even if we are 300 miles away. If we go to beyond the Heavens sect, we will have to go another 400 miles. Your Majesty, if the enemy attacks us from behind, it will be a matter of life and death. Wu Kuangyun remembered that his mouth was already foaming. How could Tai Butian not know that his decision was too rash? But he thought that Chuyang had already trekked for thousands of miles, fought hundreds of battles, and was being blocked 400 miles away. His heart was in sharp pain. He wished he could grow wings and fly over there. There must be Great Zhao's army there. There must be a lot of experts there. If he didn't have enough people on his side, he wouldn't have a chance. He thought that Chuyang would be burned alive if he didn't go and meet him. His arduous escape of 13,000 miles would be in vain. Tai Butian felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. It seemed that nothing was more important than Chuyang at this moment. If Chuyang didn't exist in this world, what would be the use of having the 4 seas? Tai Butian's heart was in pain. I don't want the country. I don't want the common people. I only want you to come back safely. No need to say more. The nearest army is 1,000 miles away. It will take 2 days and 2 nights on a fast horse. We will go and take a look. Then we will come back immediately. Nothing will happen. Tai Butian urged, General Wu, let's go. Who are we supposed to meet? Wu Kuangyun asked in a daze. In any case, we're here to provide support. Tai Butian said furiously, do you dare to disobey orders? I wouldn't dare even if you beheaded me. Wu Kuangyun was on the verge of tears. His tears really did fall out. His whole body was sweating profusely. Your Majesty is responsible for the country. You mustn't risk your life so easily. Are you going or not? Tai Butian shouted angrily. Your Majesty, please wait here. This general will lead the troops. Wu Kuangyun clenched his teeth, stuck out his chest and said in a heroic manner. You're going? Do you know who we're supposed to meet? Tai Butian cast a sidelong glance at him. Wu Kuangyun wanted to say, won't I know if you tell me? But he didn't dare to say it. Quickly pass down the order. Your Majesty, please kill me. Wu Kuangyun solemnly said. You think I don't dare to kill you? Tai Butian was anxious. He kicked out and shouted, men, pass on my imperial edict. Wu Kuangyun disobeyed the imperial decree and conspired to rebel. Arrest him. After he returns to the capital, his entire family will be executed. His entire family will be exterminated. All his wives and concubines will be sent away to serve as. Don't. Your Majesty, don't even think about my wife. Wu Kuangyun was so scared that his hair stood on end. He had been lying motionless on the ground like a dead dog. But now he jumped up and repeatedly waved his hands. He clenched his teeth and stamped his feet. I'll go okay. Imperial edict, this is no joke. The Emperor's words are like gold and jade. I won't be able to cry if they are taken seriously. Still not going? Tai Butian's face was cold. This guy's wife is really his favorite. He doesn't care about the others when he says that he will confiscate his family's property. He only cares about his wife. Yes. Wu Kuangyun got up and quickly ran out. Then he heard the voice of a commanding officer. If you want to go, then hurry up. The sooner the better. You stay here. I'll leave 200,000 troops for you. The most important thing is to guard the gate and guard the camp. Wu Kuangyun shouted at a tall general with a square face and big ears. This was his deputy general. His name was Wui. The two of them had cooperated for more than 10 years. Wu Kuangyun was very confident in his work. Wui had a big frame and a big head. But he didn't have any meat on his body. He was as thin as a chicken, and his tongue would run out in a gust of wind. He hadn't finished speaking when Wui grabbed his sleeve. You, what are you going to do? You, this place is very important. Wui turned out to be a stutterer. His face turned red and white foam started to come out of his mouth. In a moment of desperation, he spat a lot of saliva on Wu Kuangyun's face. Fuck. Wu Kuangyun wiped his face. I have something to do. Oh. Kuangyun. Wui shouted and looked at him sternly. He pointed his finger at his nose and said, bullshit. Something happened to you, fuck, you stupid stutterer. Let go of that hand. Wu Kuangyun slapped his hand aside. He was burning with impatience. He had heard Wu Yi stuttering non-stop, so he had become anxious and had started to stutter as well. However, Wu Yi didn't let go of his hand no matter what he said. His face turned red and his lips couldn't stop trembling. He kept shaking his head. It was obvious that he wanted to say something. But the more anxious he got, the more he stuttered. And the more he stuttered, the more anxious he became. So he couldn't say a word. Supreme Commander. The troops and horses are ready. A messenger reported. Tai Ji Tian had already finished his preparations on the other side. He shouted loudly, Wu Kuangyun, what are you doing? Wu Kuangyun still hadn't managed to break free. Wu Yi was still holding on to him, and wouldn't let him go no matter what he said. Wu Kuangyun's struggle was futile. Wu Kuangyun suddenly knelt down with a plop sound. Uncle, please let me go. My pitiful beautiful wife is about to be banished into the army. Wu Yi was stunned. He subconsciously reached out and scratched his head. What? He tilted his head and opened his mouth, rolling his eyes anxiously. Otaku? Wu Kuangyun suddenly felt relaxed. He suddenly broke free from his other hand. Then he rushed out like a whirlwind. He jumped onto his horse and clamped his legs. Then the horse flew out. He cursed loudly, you're just a windbreaker for your wife. The messenger at the side shouted, the marshal has given the order. Charge his wife. Thousands of soldiers and horses roared together, charge his wife. Their morale was immediately boosted. Wu Kuangyun's face was suddenly filled with tears. Wu Yi, who was at the back, was so angry that he rolled his eyes. He tilted his neck and opened and closed his mouth. More and more white foam came out of his mouth, but he could not say a word. He opened and closed his mouth for a long time like a gill fish that had come ashore. Finally he cursed angrily, go, your wives. He spat out a mouthful of saliva. But the army had already gone far. Wu Yi muttered and cursed. Then he suddenly sang loudly, Wu Kuangyun, you son of a bitch. You deserve to be hacked to death. I'll kill you if you imitate me again. I'll kill you? As the saying goes, a slob can dance and a stutterer can sing. These words were true. Wu Yi didn't stutter when he started singing. He would sing and curse Wu Kuangyun every time he couldn't win a debate. And this time was no exception. The army rumbled as it moved forward. Tai Bu Tian spurred his horse and rushed to the front. I hope we can make it in time. Chuyang, you must hold on. I'm coming to pick you up. 1,500 miles away, in 3 different directions, 3 armies that were marching in parallel to each other blew their horns almost at the same time, giving out the same order. All cavalrymen, gather immediately. Our target is the mountain range of Beyond the Heavens sect. Go as fast as you can. Even if you die of exhaustion on the road, you must arrive within a day and a half. Tens of thousands of armored cavalrymen rushed out of their formation as soon as they heard this order. And a big flag was fluttering in the front. The commander-in-chief had already led his personal troops to shoot forward like sharp arrows. Quick, catch up. Continuous whistling sounds and urging sounds were heard. The 3 huge streams of iron rolled up crazy smoke and dust on the ground. They rushed into the dark curtain of the night like angry dragons. Rear army, keep up with them as fast as you can. Hundreds of thousands of troops from each direction changed their direction with a crashing sound. They followed the hoof prints and ran as if their lives depended on it. Chuyang was in that cave. He was deep underground. But he suddenly felt that the entire earth was slightly trembling. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Could it be, a big army is coming? He couldn't care about anything else and immediately drilled out. Only when they came out did they realize that it was already night time. A choking smell assaulted their nostrils. The moment they came out, they almost fainted from the choking smell. Looking around, they saw that the entire forest was on fire as far as their eyes could see. He was in a sea of fire. He faintly heard someone shouting, "Withdraw! Withdraw to the passage. Iron Cloud has already arrived to pick us up. We only need to guard the passage. We won't let King of Hell Chu pass. Then everything will be settled." It was Jing Minghun's voice. This voice was very far away. Chu Yang frowned. This is clearly meant for me to hear. They must be plotting something. But it's not a plot anymore. It's an open plot. They must have set up an ambush for my team. Chu Yang was aware of the enemy's plot. But he still felt anxious. How many people in the entire Iron Cloud are worthy of such an arrangement? It must be an important person in Iron Cloud. Who could it be? Miao Qianqian? Impossible. Tai Longqing? It's possible. Wu Kuangyun? It's also possible. But it doesn't matter who it is. Iron Cloud can't afford to lose these people. I can't afford to lose them for my sake. Anyway, I've been saving my strength. I'll rush out. Chu Yang instantly made up his mind. Chapter 365. Chu Yang's clothes were as black as ink. He fiercely rushed out of the blazing fire. The whistling sound of the wind made the flames around his body crackle. In this sea of flames, he was like a mad dragon that was overturning the seas and rivers. Wherever he went, the flames would roll outwards. The flames seemed to have a mind of their own as they didn't even dare to get close to him. Jing Minghun would have been shocked if he had seen this scene. Chu Yang's current cold energy was too overbearing. The 7-yin cold energy nourished by the mysterious ice jade ointment was completely absorbed by Chu Yang. Moreover, the mysterious ice jade ointment was also swallowed by Chu Yang. This kind of extreme cold could even freeze a stone to pieces, let alone this little flame beside him. Chu Yang jumped all the way towards the place where Jing Minghun's voice had come from. The flames were almost blazing white. They were making hissing sounds. There was a strange movement in front of him. The smoke was strange. The smoke from the burning flames was black or yellow. However, the smoke in front of him was blue. Moreover, it was very light. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows and sneered. He didn't hesitate to pass through. He passed through with a whoosh. Bursts of corrosive smoke attacked him. Chu Yang didn't hold his breath. He swaggered and flew out. The corrosive smoke went into his nostrils. It was useless. Chu Yang was no longer afraid of the corrosive smoke. The smoke entered his body and became a tonic for the sword point of the Calamity Sword. Chu Yang rushed down the main peak in an instant. He rushed into the sea of fire and into the purple bamboo garden. He went all the way north from the purple bamboo garden. He jumped over 3 valleys like a sea of fire. He jumped like a meteor on the only way to Iron Cloud. There were mountains on both sides of the road. The flames soared to the sky. There was a dense forest. The sound of crackling could be heard. There was a canyon ahead. It was the most dangerous place. Moreover, the terrain was dangerous. There was no other way to pass through it except by force. Jing Minghun must be waiting for him there. He didn't know if he would face 1,000 people this time. 2,000? 3,000? Or more. However, Chu Yang's eyes were as cold as ice. He didn't waver in the slightest. He tried his best to regulate his breathing. The Calamity Sword moved back and forth on his arm. The biting cold killing intent was waiting for the moment to explode. The closer he got, the calmer he became. In his mind, dozens of scenes of being besieged by enemies appeared. In every scene he chose a path of escape. Even if there are tens of millions of people, I will still charge through. Jing Minghun was in a terrible fix. With Diwu Qingrou's permission to set fire to the mountain, he didn't have any psychological pressure. He followed the wind and lit the fire again and again. Soon, the mountain forest that stretched for 2,500 miles was burned into a candle head in the blue sky. King of Hell Chu, let's see how you'll hide this time. Jing Minghun had arrived at a safe place. He was waiting for King of Hell Chu to come knocking on his door. He was feeling very proud of himself. Looking at his right arm that was missing half of his arm, an indescribable anger rose up in his heart. There are cliffs on both sides. King of Hell Chu, you'll have to step over my body if you want to cross. As long as you have the ability. However, the fire had been burning for half the night. It was almost dawn. But King of Hell Chu still hadn't made the slightest move. Instead, the fire was spreading and was gradually sweeping towards the ambush area. Jing Ming Hun led 3,000 experts to force the fire back with great difficulty. Then they invisibly advanced several thousand feet. Naturally, the effect of advancing several thousand feet or retreating several thousand feet was the same as long as they were guarding this place. Therefore Jing Ming Hun didn't care. However, something unexpected happened when he didn't care. The mountain forest at the side was extremely steep, and even the sky was burning red. Suddenly, an extremely mournful and shrill cry was heard, followed by a rumbling sound. Suddenly, dozens and hundreds of house-sized fireballs, mixed with scattered flames, smashed down from the cliff with earth-shattering might. Then a bang sound was heard from the middle of the cliff. Countless pieces of rock fell down like a meteor shower, and smashed towards Jing Ming Hun and the others. This must be King of Hell Chu's movement. Everyone be careful. Don't let him escape. Retreat for the time being. Jing Ming Hun shouted. Everyone flew back. Rumble, 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 the falling stones pushed up a small hill in front of the crowd. Jing Ming Hun heaved a sigh of relief. Luckily the cliff hasn't collapsed. It has only collapsed from the belly. The same situation hasn't happened elsewhere. It's a natural stronghold. King of Hell Chu doesn't have the ability to fly over it? But why did the belly of the cliff suddenly collapse? Isn't this too unreasonable? However, Jing Ming Hun turned pale with fright when he heard screams. What's going on? Then an incomparably fishy smell suddenly spread with the wind. Jing Ming Hun smelled this smell and suddenly felt dizzy. Then he felt a faint burning sensation in his lower abdomen. Jing Ming Hun opened his eyes to look. He was scared out of his wits. His scalp went numb and his back was covered in cold sweat. My mother. What's going on? He saw that 4 or 5 experts of the Golden Horse Riders department were floating in the air not far from him. But they hadn't jumped up. There were 2 huge monsters in front of them. They were as thick as half a house and nearly 300 feet long giant snakes. These 2 giant snakes had a shining horn on their heads. Therefore they could only rush out from the side of the cliff. They rushed out and fell down with a loud rumble. Their scales were extremely sturdy. But they still felt dizzy from the fall. After all, the cliff was too high. They had fallen down from a height of several thousand feet. So they should be proud that they hadn't turned into a pile of mud. One of the snakes unconsciously coiled around 4 people. This was a very nutritious food. Therefore it didn't loosen its grip even though it was temporarily dizzy. It calmed down a little and began to gorge itself. Jing Ming Hun was about to cry. How can this be? Spirit beast? What's the level of this spirit beast? Someone asked with apprehension. It's too big. Look at its appetite. I wonder if it can finish half of us after eating all 3,000 of us. Who cares if it's half full or not? Anyway, we can't let it eat us. Another person held a steel saber in his right hand. It's the lowest level. Jing Ming Hun slowly retreated step by step. His complexion was calm. But he couldn't wait to turn around and run away. Even if I go to the upper 3 heavens and the upper 3 heavens, I won't be able to see such a terrifying beast so easily. How can I encounter such an existence at the top of the food chain in the lower 3 heavens? However, he didn't know that the upper 3 heavens and the lower 3 heavens were in a state of chaos. So, such a thing had become a common occurrence. Everyone was startled and scared. But then they saw that the snake that was more than 100 feet tall had already fallen down. The other snake that was lying on the ground shook its head vigorously and raised its head. 4 gloomy and cold eyes looked at Jing Ming Hun and the others. They didn't conceal their desire to devour them. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.